Hey everyone, hello. I am Bevan Clare, and I'm welcoming you here today to the Free Herbalism Project. And I'm super excited. We've done a few of these now. We have the kinks worked out. I shouldn't say that at the beginning, right? But we're just so happy to have you here. The chat is moving right along. We see people from all over the place. So happy you could tune in. There's a great program today, and we are going to get started. So welcome. And you see, we've got a whole bunch. We have live music to kick it off. I'm going to start you off with a few little tidbits, and then live music. We got some great talks. You don't want to miss any of it. And if you have questions, there is a Q&A tool you can find. So if you put the questions in the chat, they're just going to get buried because it's moving pretty quickly and everyone's busy. But if you go ahead and put those questions in the Q&A tool, we will make sure that we get those questions during the Q&A periods after the talk. So go ahead and put those in that Q&A function. You can see there. And so this is all for you. You know, we put this together so that we can bring community together, so that we can hear from some of these incredible people and they can share their gifts. And we can just all kind of sit together in all of our different places all over the world. I am currently on the road a bit, and I'm in Las Vegas, Nevada, of all places at the moment. So that's pretty exciting. And before we get started with our music, I am going to share just a little bit to get us warmed up, because I am often on the road. So I know some of you, you know that I am often moving around, and I'm going to share a little bit about herbs to travel the world with. So I spend about 75% of my time traveling. I love it. It's amazing. And herbal medicines are the perfect companions for traveling. And when I said that, I got a picture of me sitting on an airplane with like a pot of herbs in soil sitting next to me. They don't quite accompany me in that way. And one of the beauties about herbs is that herbs are everywhere. And, you know, when you become an herbalist, you are never alone. You're never lonely. There's always herbs around. I haven't been to a corner on the planet really where there aren't herbs within somewhat of a reach, and usually much closer. And so that is one of the delights. So there are plants everywhere. You know, we always have them. We have access to them, whether as like spices or medicines or a little bit of both. And I'm so inspired by that. It's like meeting up with friends anywhere you go. And there's a lot of repeats around the globe. You know, there's unique herbs everywhere, and then there's a lot of things that are really common. So for me, I try not to bring too much. I mean, it would be great to pack a whole apothecary and just like bring everything along. I don't know how many of you ever seen Seven Songs First Aid Backpack that has, 150 different tinctures in it and things. But I'm a little bit of a lighter traveler than Seven Song, and I have a few things that I try to find with me or that I bring along. So these are 5 herbs or herbal products that I just won't leave home without. They're always going to be with me when I go on a trip somewhere, and I use all of them. And so this is kind of my list cut down over the years to things that I really love. The first is garlic, and I don't usually bring that with me. First of all, it's an agricultural product, but otherwise you can find garlic almost anywhere. And so I'll often pick up a couple bulbs of garlic whenever I get somewhere. And for my own health and wellness, when I go to a small restaurant where they're cooking food right there for me, I'll ask if they can throw some more garlic in it and give them a bulb. Or I can always chop it up or chew it up, add it to a little bit of honey or nut butter or avocado or oil to use it. And just, garlic is so phenomenal for any type of immune supportive kind of proactive things that you want to do when you are out and about. So I always bring garlic with me, and it also tastes delicious. And I know most of you have probably done this, but if you haven't ever rubbed garlic on the bottom of your feet to find out how quickly it goes into your bloodstream, so you just cut open a clove of garlic, rub it on the bottom of your feet, and you'll be able to taste it into your mouth pretty quickly. And so it's pretty phenomenal. Garlic, it's easy, it's everywhere, it's affordable, you know how to use it. One of the best things to know, and you can find it all over the world. Another thing I don't leave home without is a sustainable essential oils. So I'm not an aromatherapist. I'm not going to get into really like which one and so on. But of course, things like lavender or tea tree are always really easier and safer to use. And I love having it and a sustainable essential oil around, whether it's putting on something and using it in an aromatherapy sense, or if there's, you know, rashes or skin infections and so on. I love having all of those products that I can use it for. So, you know, I always carry one with me, always make sure that it's around, make sure that I have it in reach so that I could use it. And it can actually, like, you know, disinfect things as well. If there's something that I really need to clean out, I could use it a little bit like that. So love those sustainable essential oils, and picture of lavender here, because that is one of my favorites to travel the world with. Another one might be a little bit different for some of you, but I have found this is one of the things that I just absolutely always use, and that is a high quality throat spray. So you can make your own. All the like leading tincture companies that I know of, they all have some kind of throat spray, and they're just great because a lot of times, you know, when you're starting to get sick, you get that scratchy throat. That's one of the first signs, right? You're like, oh, my throat feels a little bit raw. And that's actually not necessarily just because your throat is a little bit raw. That's often that respiratory mucosa is where certain viruses enter your body, and some of the first places of infection is your tonsils and so on. So, you know, always bringing that. And a lot of the ones that I really like, they have propolis in them. I think, you know, propolis, that bee medicine, harvested sensibly and sustainably from beehives, is just phenomenal for these types of things. And they often also have echinacea, which is why I put that echinacea picture in there. So I love that with throat spray. And another one that I always bring with me is chamomile. Love the chamomile. And chamomile is just like, it's all over the place. You know, you can be anywhere in the world, and you can go into like a conventional coffee or tea shop or something and find at least a little bit of chamomile. But it is, you know, it's in different languages. You can know it as manzanilla or halva, or depending on where you're at, so you can find that chamomile. And it's so lovely topically or internally. It's so beautiful. And so love that chamomile. You know, I see a few people asking about sustainability around essential oils. I would go with companies that you trust. And of course, we try not to use too many of things that are precious, but look at companies that have good ethical sourcing and can tell you exactly where it's coming from, and that it's cultivated and so on, or that it's an ethical source. So yeah, chamomile, you know, it's wonderful for like babies up through elderly skin and bodies, and just like one of my very favorites as a beautiful tea internally and externally. And so this is generally German chamomile I'm talking about. And then another one, this is, you know, the tea bags in general, like chamomile. Tea bags are so useful, you know, to use topically and internally. So I love bulk herbs, but on the road sometimes the tea bags are super easy, and you can use them a few times and let them soak for a long time. So love some chamomile. Make sure you bring that with you. It's great as an iced tea. It's just so good for that nervous system tummy. And the last thing that I always bring, my number 5, not in any particular order though, is salve and diaper cream. So it's funny to bring diaper cream with you if you don't have somebody in diapers. But I found when my little ones were in diapers, I was using diaper cream for all sorts of things. You know, if somebody would get a burn or a rash or an abrasion or an irritation, or, you know, just whatever was going on. And I always had some calendula diaper cream, and I was like, oh, let's slap some of that on it. Oh, and I realized, as much as I also use salve and I love salve, I use both of them because they are really different. You know, diaper cream really like coats and protects. It's almost a little bit more like a lip balm kind of thing, but for like other parts of your body, you can use it that way. So, calendula is just awesome in these ways. And so that's, you know, one of these products that I always find is like some salve or diaper cream with calendula. And also potentially topical use of comfrey. Both of those might be something that I would use. So, you know, so wherever you go, you can bring some of these things, you can find these things. There's always the medicines around. You can, you know, if you're a ginger person or you're a cinnamon person, you can find these things wherever you go. So I love to travel. Traveling the world as an herbalist, I think, is super rewarding. If you're interested, Rose was kind enough to let me share that I offer some travel courses to help people learn how to become travelers. So if you're interested in traveling the world, you can do that. I can help with that. And if it's a little daunting right now, I also have a totally free course on how to travel during COVID-19. So to make sure you can be safe, responsible, ethical, and that you don't have the logistical snafus that happen nowadays with traveling. And I'm super excited about having more herbalists out there because I think we have the ability to meet other herbalists and help people all around the world understand how powerful plant medicine is, that, you know, what is intact in all these cultures all over the world is the best medicine in many ways. And so I'm offering for the first time a discount for Free Herbalism Project listeners. The first 100 people who are interested in a course get 50% off any of the courses. And if you're interested in that, there's a code FHP, Free Herbalism Project 2021. So you can check that out if you're interested. And you'll also be getting more information when the newsletter, when the email comes out afterwards. But if you're, you know, pack up your first aid kit. If you're going to travel, don't forget your herbs. Make sure you bring everything that you need so that you can stay healthy and well and have all of your favorite herbal allies with you wherever you're traveling in the world. So, you know, thanks for hearing a little bit about some of those herbal travels. And now we have a super special surprise for you. It's not really a surprise, but it is, we have live music from the Sugar Beets. And the music is always the best. So if you're sitting, you might want to be standing. You might want to move your chair out of the way, get ready to groove out a little bit. And Sugar Beets have been performing for 25 years. It's a blend of kind of traditional music and contemporary original songwriting. They have, you know, it's like almost every genre, right? It's bluegrass, Celtic, fiddle, Motown, swing, pop, but no matter what it is, it's always fresh, inspiring, and exciting. They have 6 professional recordings. The most recent one is called The Secret to Happiness. So if you love this music, you can check out The Secret to Happiness. And I don't know which one of the genres they'll be playing for you today and what it'll sound like, because I haven't heard it yet either. But I know whatever it is, it's going to be surprising, uplifting, and totally groovy. So enjoy, and I will see you back right after the music.
All right.
Okay.
We're rolling. Ask your teacher.
So electric, so electric is your voice, is your voice. Did you select it from up in heaven? Was it your choice? Your smile is your smile. It's so exciting when I get to see it for a little while. I just can't help but have a feeling that you're above me in some way. no choice. Na 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 yeah. Na 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 yeah. Na 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 yeah. Na 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 yeah. Na 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 yeah.
We are the Sugar Beets. Thank you so much to Mountain Rose Herbs for having us here. We're really honored to be part of this free herbalism project today. And what an incredible thing to have Mountain Rose Herbs in our community here in Eugene, Oregon, and to be sharing this so generously, this great herbal education with people all over the world. So we're glad to be here.
Sure are.
I hope you're all having fun.
In your living rooms, or wherever you may be. Everyone gives advice, here, there, and everywhere. Someone's always there to tell of a better way. Some just complain away with a bad luck.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Hey, and this is a time I could say Sugar Beat's got some people behind the scenes like Janine Emery, who she and I kind of came up with that song. She did most of the lyrics, kind of put the music together. The Sugar Beats bring their best to it. So Electric, that first song was by John Sheenan, who I met in the dorms 32 years ago.
University of Oregon.
And still writes great songs for us. This next one is called Brand New Day. John and I wrote this one together, and it's about coming around to a new
New
perspective.
day, and here we are, how long into this crazy pandemic, and like a lot of musicians, we haven't really had the opportunity to get out there and play much. So we're super honored to be here.
Yeah.
Grateful. This is fun.
Yep. 2, 1, 2, 3, 4.
Brand new day, never seen before. When I open my eyes and I step out the door, I float like a feather on a gentle wind. Not afraid to fall on the place I see. I wanna ride my magic high, paint my colors on the empty sky, leave behind my foolish crowd on a lonely throne deep underground. Oh, 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 I'm coming around. I hear the sing
again for having us. I'm going to introduce the band real quick. Over there we got Mr. Matt Keenan on the bass. Back here we have Marty Chilla on guitar, some vocals too. The amazing Haley Loren here on vocals and percussion. We got Jeremy Wegner on the mandolin, David Burham on the fiddle, and my name is Megan Bassett. And you know, it's a short little music interlude here, so if you haven't done it already, clear some space and at home and make a dance a little bit here. We're trying to keep this something that you could move your body to.
Get up, get up. All right, here's another beautiful one. This is Shooting Star. Thank you, Janine. Beautiful gift. Here we go.
Shooting star, I am humbled by your light. I know nothing, this colorful life. Take me down to the waterside, bring me love. Send away this pride, bring me love. On the wings of change, bring me love. Where there was nothing but pain, and take me down to the waterside, watching the tides. I know nothing but this colorful life, life, life. Shooting star, I search the skies for morning light. I wait for something, this colorful life, life, life. Take me down the waterside. Take me down. Send away this pride. Take me down the waterside. Take me down. Send away this pride. 'Cause I know nothing, nothing, nothing. I know nothing. I know nothing, nothing, nothing. I know nothing. But this colorful life, life, life. Bring me love. Bring me love. Bring me love. Bring me love. Take me down to the waterside. I am humbled by your light. I search the skies for morning light. Shooting star. Shooting star, I am humbled by your light. I know nothing, this colorful life, life, life. Take me down, take me down, take me down, take me down. 'Cause I know nothing, nothing, nothing. I know nothing. I know nothing, nothing, nothing. I know nothing. Bring me love. Bring me love. Bring me love. Bring me love. Take me down to the waterside. I am humbled by your light. I search the skies for morning light. Shooting star.
Megan and Haley singing together again.
It's really fun. And Mountain Rose Herbs has this awesome space here right next to the Mercantile called the Annex. And we're playing in there, and it's just a really sweet room with lots of wood. It's a nice, nice little place to be.
And some of our favorite people in the room with us.
Some
And-
very
Weird.
Americana train sounds in the
Yes.
background. That's Americana.
That's
It's
right.
Americana.
Pure Americana.
And we want to say thank you to Aaron Dietrich over here too for working the camera or cameras and just making this happen on the technical side.
This next one, this next one's written by Matt Megan. This is called, wait for it, The Music. The Music.
And if you are up dancing, and if you're not, get up and dance. And go like this, if you're up there, dancing.
We can't see you. You can do anything you
cannot
want.
see you, but DJ, whatever it is, get down. Feel very nice.
the music. I want it to happy. Take me without asking of me. Only desire for life. The music, take me on a journey and never give me back. Neither dream nor time nor space. I'm nowhere but tonight. I'm gonna let it go. I'm gonna say goodnight. We were meant to live higher and higher. Tonight, I'm gonna let it out. I'm gonna set my soul free. Not running from myself. I'm nowhere, but I'm not lost. No, no. I'm nowhere, but I'm not lost. I'm not lost. I'm not lost, not lost. I'm nowhere, but I'm not lost. I'm not lost. I'm not lost, not lost. I'm nowhere, but I'm not lost. I'm nowhere, but I'm not
That was our disco-licious tune.
All right, we're gonna do one by Peter Rowan in 1975. The Grateful Dead took a break. Jerry Garcia joined a bluegrass band called Old and in the Way. So all the Deadheads love this one, right? Midnight Moonlight. I get to sing finally. Finally.
Finally, your
I've been very
moment
patient.
in the sun.
All right.
You ever feel lonesome down in San Antonio? Beg, steal, or borrow 2 nickels or a dime. Just call me on the phone. I'll meet you at Alamo Mission. We can say our prayers. The Holy Ghost and the Virgin Mother will heal us as we kneel there. Moonlight in the midnight, moonlight, midnight, moonlight, moonlight, midnight,
tomorrow for the deeds you have done. No hope for tomorrow in the setting of the sun. The ocean is howling with dreams in my head, and that last good morning sunrise will be the brightest you've ever seen. Moonlight, midnight, moonlight, midnight, moonlight. Aaron knows it. Moonlight, midnight, moonlight, midnight, we can say our prayers. The Holy Ghost and the Virgin Mother will heal us as we kneel there. The moonlight, the midnight, the moonlight, midnight, moonlight, the moonlight, the midnight. Moonlight, midnight, moonlight. Break it down. Moonlight, in the midnight, in the moonlight, midnight, moonlight, in the moonlight, in the midnight, in the moonlight, midnight, moonlight, in the moonlight, in the midnight, in the moonlight, midnight, moonlight. One more time, one more time. In the moonlight, in the midnight, in the moonlight, midnight, moonlight.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Have a great day.
Hello, everyone. How amazing was that? I mean, wow, it was so fun to go to that fantastic concert with all of you and hear all of that. And I'm always amazed, even through these devices that we have, how much that comes through. So huge round of applause for the Sugar Beats. Every time they would pause, I could hear all of you clapping and cheering and saying thank you to them. So really uplifting and a great way to start our event. So we continue on with great, amazing, awesome things. We have the incredible herbalist Sharon Lipner Grover coming to speak with you. Sharon is a clinical herbalist, a health educator, a field botanist, an ethical wildcrafter, deeply a plant person. Sharon is also the director and educator at Sage Country Herb School of Botanical Studies, which is north of San Diego. And so it's one of the fun things about this. We can be in all different places, all different ecosystems, and tune in to bring you herbs. So Sharon is a published writer, speaks at events, universities, all over the place. I'm really excited to get to hear Sharon, full of clinical wisdom. I've heard a lot about her teaching over the years. And so Sharon is bringing to you Unsung Heroes of Immunity. Enjoy.
Hi, my name is Shayna Lipner Grover from Sage Country Herbs, and I am here to talk about unsung herbal heroes of immunity. I'd like to first, of course, thank Mountain Rose Herbs for inviting me. I have been a fan of the Free Herbalism Project for many years, and I am absolutely honored to be part of one today. So we're talking today about herbs that are affecting moisture and movement. So let's get started. So the immune system is not one singular system. It's actually a system that works in relationship with every other system, which is really, really awesome. All systems in the body are either directly or indirectly associated with the immune system. Now, oftentimes we think of things like mucus, inflammation, and histamine in a negative connotation, but actually all of those compounds are specifically necessary in order for our immune system to be effective and in order for us to be able to stimulate healing response. As with everything in health, it's always about a balance. Let's talk about fluid system energetics. So generally we excrete about a quart of fluid a day in the form of urine from the kidneys, sweat from the skin, as well as internal mucosa like our sinuses and our lungs, as well as the vapor that is coming out of my lungs as I speak. A quart of fluid a day is what we are releasing. When one of those surfaces excretes more fluid, then it's pulling from other surfaces. For example, have you ever had it where your eyes or your sinuses just felt really dried out, but then every time you took a drink of water, you had to pee? Every time. And it's like, oh, I wish I could just hold on to some of this water to hydrate my sinuses, but every time I drink water, it just goes right out. Ideally, what we need to do is rebalance that fluid excretion, and that will help to maintain better homeostasis, or the balance of the body, and that will affect more efficient waste removal. So ideally, we want to be looking at the amount of release from these different surfaces and see what's running in excess and what is running deficient. This is often accomplished by stimulating the deficient system. Whether this is, if we're looking at our mucosal membranes, we're talking about like the sinuses and the lungs and the urinary tract and the tube that goes from our mouth all the way down to our anus, the digestive tube or digestive tract. The entire way is a mucosal membrane. So if we want to stimulate, one of the ways that we can do this is by looking at the big picture, getting more electrolytes in our diet. Electrolytes are basically minerals that are charged. And when they are charged, they are actually going to hold on to more fluid. This is the basis of osmosis, where water follows salt. And so we need to have salts in the body. And when I say salts, plural, we're not just talking about sodium. We're also talking about magnesium and calcium, potassium, phosphate, a variety of charged minerals, which then help to hold on to fluid in the body. Other things that we can do is to use some of our herbal rock stars, the demulcents and emollients, because they are actually helping to provide extra moisture, and we're going to get in deep about them. Now, the idea of balancing our fluid system energetics may be very gentle and subtle in its effects, but can often produce immediate and noticeable change, which is really powerful. And I can say for myself, I live in the Southwest, and there are times where we are really dry, where the humidity is really low. And on those times when I am using things that are specifically affecting my body, holding on to moisture, I feel it immediately, and not just in like more supple skin or softer skin or nice hydrated sinuses. I feel it in how I feel connected to my body. When we're really dry, it can actually make us feel not as connected. So when we have good moisture so that our elimination pathways can remove the moisture as needed, but not overdoing it, then we can end up holding on to more moisture in the long run. Now, this effect is often very gentle and it can show subtly, but in my experience of working clinically with clients and students and within my community over the last 20 years, what I have noticed is the subtle little changes made by making choices every day make a bigger difference in the long run to our overall health than any big thing that we try to do. The day-to-day choices and make a bigger difference, and making sure that those are focused on our deeper health. The other thing that this does is the more that somebody can feel more grounded, can feel more hydrated in their body, can feel a relief to some of the symptoms that they're dealing with, this creates belief in the healing process and it builds trust. And this is a really powerful thing when somebody really believes that they are healing because they can feel it. That really facilitates that healing on a much deeper level. So the unsung heroes that I want to talk about today are our demulcent herbs and our lymphatic herbs. All of these are playing a role in moisture, of course, and movement. Demulcents are literally holding on to moisture, and lymphatics are helping to move the lymph system, which is essentially moving moisture or fluid around the body. So that is really important. They also both play really vital roles in the immune system and the immune system's ability to move around the body and have an impact on the infections or other imbalances that might be happening. The most important thing that we need to understand about physiology is that our mucosal membranes need to be moist. This is, once again, things like our eyes and sinuses and throat and lungs and GI tract. And when I say moist, this is not drippy with mucus, or the other end of the spectrum, not dry where we can't actually move. We want them to be moist, which means that they can be pliable and flexible. We've all experienced this. Have you ever fallen asleep in the sun and you get a sunburn on an area that bends like an elbow or the back of a knee? And then you go and bend it, and it's because all of that tissue is so dry and irritated from that sunburn. And then you put on some aloe and it eases it a little bit. Same thing goes for our sinuses. When the sinuses are really dry, just breathing in any like pollen can feel like an irritant. When your mucosal membranes of your sinuses are moist and supple and you breathe in some pollen, it's just going to get stuck in that mucus. And then the point of having nice, thin, healthy mucus is to flush away particles, pathogens, pollen, anything that could be an irritant to the sinuses gets flushed out when we have nice, healthy mucosa. Healthy, pliable, and flexible mucosa. The other thing that's really important to understand here is all membranes are made up of cells, and each of those cells has the ability to replicate itself and therefore the ability to replicate its DNA. This happens in the mitochondria of the cell. So if a pathogen gains access to a cell, it can inject its own DNA into the mitochondria of your cell. And now that mitochondria is replicating the bacterial DNA. And it replicates and replicates and replicates until the cell is filled with bacteria. And now that forces the cell into cellular death called apoptosis. The cell opens and the bacteria comes out. And now you have a bacterial infection wherever that cell is. Now, this is really, really common. A dry mucosal membrane is a prime target for a pathogen to be able to adhere on. If that throat cell, for instance, has a nice thin layer of mucus, so it's nice and moist and pliable, the bacteria literally cannot adhere on. Consequently, the bacteria cannot inject its DNA into your own cell's mitochondria. A dry membrane and also a boggy, really congested membrane create a perfect environment for this type of infection to happen. So even something as simple as having moist mucosal membranes is a majorly important part of how our bodies are going to be able to defend against pathogens. So most of our mucus is thin and clear and watery in consistency so that it can easily flush away particles, impurities, pollen, pathogens, as we were talking about. But when infection is present, we have another type of mucus that can be deployed, and that is thick and sticky, and it's there to wrap around invaders and neutralize the attack. If you've got mucus wrapped around the pathogen, then it can't actually adhere on and create more. Mucosal cells, as they are secreting mucus, it's actually a viscous colloid, which is containing things like antiseptic enzymes. Mucus is not just slimy in consistency or watery in consistency. It also contains antiseptic enzymes, immunoglobulins, inorganic salts, as well as assorted types of proteins like lactoferrin, which is a part of our innate immune system, meaning came from the very beginning, and it has an antibacterial effect. So our mucus is not just creating a slippery environment for the pathogens to not be able to adhere onto a mucosal membrane. The mucus is also a vehicle for immunity to get to the area, for immune cells. This is incredibly important. Now, the average human body is producing about a quart of mucus a day to coat all the tubes of the body. If you don't live in an environment that's dry, you may not notice it, but dehydration plays such a huge role in the quality of our immune system's ability to be resilient. This is also why hydration is so incredibly important. So the role of demulcents. Oh my goodness, I love demulcents so much. I feel like demulcents are like this subtle secret weapon that it's like, oh yeah, you know, they're slimy and soothing. Yeah, like that's great and all. But no, really. They really are like an unsung hero. There are 3 different ways that we can work with these mucilaginous slimy herbs. So we can work with them internally, in which they're called a demulcent. We can work with them externally, like on our skin, in which they're called an emollient. The other way is called a reflex action. A reflex action means if I have dry lungs and every time I cough, there's this dryness and it feels irritated, then I go ahead and I drink some demulcent tea. The tea is not going into my lungs. I could drown that way. We don't want tea or any fluid going into our lungs. However, the feel of that demulcent tea on my throat will actually trigger the dry mucosal membranes of my body by reflex to start producing their own thin, healthy mucus. And that is really cool. So as I'm drinking my hydrating demulcent tea, I will notice that my lungs will actually start getting a little moister, and maybe that mucus starts like kind of moving, and I can go, oh wow, like now instead of it being all dry and irritated, it's actually starting to move. And that's from the reflex action of drinking demulcent tea, which is super cool. So there are times when our membranes just don't produce enough mucus to be able to keep that healthy balance. And when this happens, we tend to feel really dry or stretched or irritated and really open up to infection. Some of the reasons why this might happen is, well, commonly it's just dehydration. It's just people not realizing that we really need to make sure that we stay hydrated, not just when we sweat a lot or when we work out, but also in general, that we are constantly excreting fluid, so we need to replace it. Other things that might cause this would be environmental factors. Maybe it's pollution or a high pollen count day. Maybe it's just weather or humidity. I know down here in the Southwest, we get these winds called the Santa Anas. And the Santa Anas are basically, they are just really dry. Like everything just feels dry, dry, dry when the Santa Anas come. So that certainly would contribute. Poor fats in the diet. Every mucosal membrane and every cell in the body is made The membrane itself of every cell is made of fats and protein, or the breakdown products of that, fatty acids and amino acids. Of course, excessive stress will dry out our mucosal membranes, and we all know what stress feels like. There's so many ways that it manifests, but these are some of the very common ways. Did I mention dehydration? Because that definitely plays a big role. So during these times, we have these herbal allies called demulcents. Now, demulcents are generally herbs that are rich in a compound called mucilage. And mucilage is a type of water-loving fiber. It is primarily made up of compounds called mucopolysaccharides. Mucopolysaccharides are water-loving. They will hold on to water. So anybody who has ever experienced a demulcent tea, sometimes the herbs, if you just have them free floating, will look like they're coated in slime, because as they are being hydrated by the water and releasing some of their medicinal action into the water, you can actually see some of that mucilage coming out. So that mucilage coming out of demulcent herbs tends to be slimy and cooling in its energetic. We say it puts the topical fire out, which is a wonderful way to think about when you think about inflammation. As a matter of fact, I think I learned that phrase specifically from Howie Brownstein and Stephen Yeager of the Columbine School. So that slimy and cooling energetic can be really amazing to help hydrate these dry mucosal membranes. So they are soothing, they're often anti-inflammatory. Now, I did say cooling energetic. There is actually one demulcent that defies that, and that is cinnamon. But cinnamon is one of these crazy magical herbs that is both astringent and drying and demulcent and slimy and hydrating at the same time. Most of our demulcents, actually every other one that I can think of, are all cooling in its energetic. Really wonderful for dry, hot skin, dry, irritated membranes. And remember, irritation generally leads to heat. And remember, 4 cardinal signs of inflammation: pain, redness, heat, and swelling. So when we can help address some of those just by keeping our body hydrated by using demulcents, or if we're using it topically, emollients, really, really cool. They actually have an anti-inflammatory and cooling response to any mucosal membrane that they touch, or by the reflex action be touching. So what are some of our demulcent herbs? By far my favorite demulcent herbs to work with are in the Malvaceae family. This is sometimes called the hibiscus family or the marshmallow family, or maybe you've heard it be called the okra family. The Malvaceae family is, well, the most well-known that you'd probably recognize would be marshmallow. I adore marshmallow. One of the cool things about the Malvaceae is that many of these plants are mucilage containing, and many of them are also non-toxic. Now, of course, you still need to be aware of where you are sourcing things, but in general, all parts of the marshmallow plant, Althea officinalis is the primary species, but there's many other species. The main part that's used is the root or the leaf, but really all the flowers are also pretty slimy as well. If you pluck a petal from a flower and you put it on your tongue, it will just dissolve, and it is quite lovely. So marshmallow is definitely one of my favorites, and I use that a lot. However, also in that family is cheeseweed. And one of my favorite things about cheeseweed is that it is one of the most common invasive weeds across the continental United States. I am a huge proponent of using the invasive weeds that grow around us, as long as we can source and harvest them in a safe and ethical manner, as well as make sure that we're harvesting them from areas that are clean. If we can use invasive weeds, I mean, the basis of an invasive weed is that it's something, a plant that is growing in a place that you don't want it. Well, if we can then turn around and use that for benefit as food or medicine, how wonderful is that? In cheeseweed, it's easy to identify. It's got these gorgeous flowers. The Malvaceae commonly have 5 petals that are free, meaning they're not fused together. And you can see that here in this cheeseweed flower that looks like it actually has lines drawn on it with a fine purple pen. Oh, it's so beautiful. Now, cheeseweed is called cheeseweed, or Malva neglecta, Malva parviflora. but it gets the common name cheeseweed because the seed pods look like little miniature cheese wheels. They're also delightfully delicious. They've got a lovely crunchy texture. They're not so demulcent as the leaves, which are really beautiful and very identifiable as well. The petals of the flower definitely will dissolve into slime on your tongue. And then the root of this plant. And the cool thing, it's a weed. You'll never get rid of all of it because it's amazing how weeds just find ways of being able to replant themselves. So what a great way to be able to access getting more moisture into your system by using an invasive weed that you could harvest yourself. Another one of my favorite plants in the Malvaceae to use is because I do live in the Southwest, and that is globe mallow, also called Sphaeralsia. It's one of the funnest names to say, Sphaeralsia. And Sphaeralsia also has 5 petals that are free, and they are really beautiful, often like a peachy orange going into like a golden sunset type of red, really beautiful. And then the leaves, and really all the plant, is so covered in fine hairs. In botany, we call it tomentose, where you literally can't see the green underneath the hairs, so the whole plant looks like it's silver. Absolutely gorgeous, and same with the other ones, the leaves, the flowers, all of that can be used. Now, of course, there's plenty of other demulcent herbs. Again, outside of the Malvaceae, the ones that I use the most would be, well, you'll probably recognize them because they are one of the most popular superfoods on the market right now, and that is chia seeds. Chia seeds are awesome. Chia is actually in the Lamiaceae family, the mint family. Beyond that, chias are actually a sage plant. They're a salvia. So salvia, when it comes to chia, mostly what you buy on the market is going to be Salvia hispanica. And it is a beautiful little mint plant. They are annual plants, and they have these gorgeous little flowers. But mostly you don't see that unless you are growing it or you grow in an environment where it grows as well. What you probably will recognize is the look of these seeds. They're very beautiful, they're very small, and the coolest thing about chia, other than the fact that you can make this beautiful chia seed pudding, is that chia seeds are made to be resilient. Their coating outside of their shell, they have a mucilage coating, and that coating protects the seed. It can sit, the seed of chia can sit for years in the dirt or in the sand, just waiting for one drop of rain to hit it directly and moisten that mucilage, which then wakes up the seed and says, hey, time to sprout. So I love that idea that chia is, not only is it a survival food, but it also is a survival plant as well. Super cool. There's also flax seeds. Now, most people know about flax because of flaxseed oil, but actually if you just take seeds of flax and you soak them in water just like you would with chia, and then you strain them out, you can feel this viscousness, and it feels amazing on the skin. I've used flaxseed after a sunburn when I didn't have aloe, and it works incredibly well. I've used flaxseed for hydrating my skin when doing like a hydrating facial. Really, really nice. You can also just drink flaxseed water. Of course, being in the Southwest, another one of my absolute favorites, and I've been developing my relationship more and more, is with prickly pear cactus. Prickly pear cactus's scientific name is Opuntia, which means jointed cactus. So prickly pear are, man, there's just so much. You can see how incredibly resilient and robust these plants can get. They grow a lot of pads. Now the pads are not actually leaves, the pads are called modified stems. And these pads are filled with mucilage on the inside that holds moisture. Now you can't just like break a pad and have that moisture drip out. It doesn't generally work like that. That moisture is locked up in the tissues. But if you take a pad and you skin off the skin of it, along with all, of course, the spines and the glochids, you don't want to have those in, and then you cut it up into pieces and you put it in water and you just let it soak. The water is slowly taking in that mucilage. You could strain it out the next day, put those same chunks into new water and drink your mucilage-rich water, and it's incredibly hydrating. It's very similar to drinking aloe water. So I really love prickly pear. The other thing you could do is you could take a pad, if my hand was a pad, and you slice it this way. So you'd have two thin pads, and then you can actually scrape the mucilage with a spoon or a fork and have this really nice colloid to put other herbs in. Really, really wonderful. Cannot stress enough how incredibly awesome Opuntia is. Just super, super cool. Wonderful, wonderful plant. And one of the other cool things about prickly pear cactus is the fact that you can see in this picture, there are so many young baby pads. These are called nopal. The young babies are the ones that are a little bit lighter green. As they age on this particular species, they become a little bit more blue. So the young nopal are little green pads, and you can actually just cut those up. Of course, you still want to get rid of any glochids or any spines, but you can just cut those up and eat them. They are very traditional food. They are wonderful in Mexican cuisine. They blend in with the flavors of black beans so well. That's another great way to get moisture in your body, is to be taking Opuntia in internally as food. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. Of course, I mentioned aloe. You know, what I learned from one of my friends, Sam Kaufman, that we can use the inside mucilage of prickly pear in the exact same way as we can use aloe. And that's really cool because aloe is a powerhouse. Now, aloe isn't a native plant to the Southwest. Actually, it's native to Africa. But we can grow it really readily. And really, you know, I remember my mom used to grow aloe in Michigan inside in the wintertime. So you can definitely grow aloe as a houseplant even. And you can use aloe water as a lovely mucilage. You can eat the inside gel of aloe. That's what we make aloe water out of. Or of course, you know, you can rub the aloe on your skin when your skin is feeling dry. Aloe is absolutely wonderful. I have also found that aloe is amazing for really itchy bites. Truly amazing, like anti-inflammatory, anti-itch, really, really wonderful. Another demulcent that is very common and can be found, is also considered pretty weedy, is plantain root. The roots of plantain. Now, plantain is just super common. It's actually called white man's foot because it seems everywhere where the colonizers of this country went, plantain followed, because plantain actually is a native plant to Europe. Plantain is awesome. Every part of it is either food or medicine, and it grows in a relatively weedy space, and so that means that oftentimes we can't over-harvest it. You can use it as a food, but what we're talking about here is specifically the root, because the root of plantain is the part that has the most emulsancy or mucilage to it. So you can see the roots are not generally very thick and robust, at least not down here in the Southwest, but the leaves are very identifiable with those parallel veins. A couple other demulcents that I use on occasion, but not as much. Number one would be slippery elm. Very, very common on the market, but slippery elm is actually on the watch list. The tree itself is on the watch list for United Plant Savers, so I try to be really aware of that when I'm choosing herbs to use on a regular basis. The other thing is slippery elm is an inner bark, and it's just so much easier to harvest a leaf or the root of a weedy invasive plant than to go and harvest bark. There's just more processing involved. So slippery elm is commonly used. Licorice. Licorice is another truly miraculous herb. I don't tend to use it a lot for its demulcent action because there's so many others. And the problem with licorice is that it has a lot more going on with it. And so it is actually contraindicated to anyone with high blood pressure, hypertension, or any type of chronic kidney disease. We want to be really careful about licorice. It can actually contribute to raising blood pressure if we're not careful. So great herb, truly wonderful herb. And if you have low blood pressure, then licorice is a great demulcent to use. But if you have high blood pressure, you wouldn't want to use licorice. You'd want to choose one of these others. The other demulcent that is truly a wonderful demulcent, but I don't tend to use all that much, at least not internally, is comfrey. And the picture you see here is actually of the gorgeous scorpioid inflorescence of the comfrey flower. Oh, they're so pretty. But the mucilaginous part of comfrey is in the root. Unfortunately, with most comfrey on the market, the root is also rich in a compound called pyrrolizidine alkaloids, or PAs. And PAs of comfrey specifically are toxic to the liver, and they build up in the liver. We don't have the ability to actually cycle them out. Now, there are PAs in other plants that our livers can deal with, but unfortunately the PAs in comfrey can build up, and you don't know this is happening until there's a problem. And so if you use it topically, not a problem at all. You're not going to absorb PAs. But I tend to use my comfrey root topically if I'm going to use it as a demulcent, and only save using it internally when I really, really need it and it's really specific. Otherwise, there's so many other demulcents to use that I don't see why I should use one that has any possible toxicity, right? Oh boy, now we get to the next powerhouse. That is our lymphatic system. Man, the lymph system is so incredibly powerful, functional. It just does so much, and it's really an unsung hero of the body. So the human body is an amazing array of checks and balances to maintain function, absorption, utilization, elimination of all the things that are required for every single process of day-to-day life. Everything about the natural world is in balance, and when that balance is disturbed, symptoms are going to start to show. All symptoms is a way of our body saying, hey, pay attention. Sinuses, we got something going on here. Pay attention here. So this is a good thing. Now, the lymphatic system is a primary player in the body. It helps to keep the balance between all these different cycles, the cycles of infection, inflammation, congestion, digestion, immunity, detoxification, so many things that the lymphatic system is involved in. By far, my favorite metaphor for the lymph system is that of a river. The way that its flow is ever dependent on the cycles of the earth, in the same way that our lymphatic flow is ever dependent on the movement of our body, the hydration of our body. I also like the way that a river is very dependent on the back pressure coming from its source. It's also the buildup of detritus, broken stems from trees, dead leaves or dead bugs, things falling in it. You've got animals that are purposefully building dams. You've got humans who are purposefully building dams to control the flow, and everything that it interacts with on its journey. Whether we're looking at the liver or the lymphatic system, these are really appropriate metaphor. The other way of thinking about the lymphatic system is that it is akin to the sewer system of the body. It runs throughout the body with many processing plants. Now, these are the things that we call lymph glands or lymph nodes. They are throughout the body, with the most concentration being in the hot parts, around the armpits, around the groin area, but they are actually throughout. So these little glands or nodes are actually mini processing plants. So as you have something in the lymph that is moving through the sewer of your body, it can go into these little mini processing plants that break it down into smaller and smaller, more innocuous pieces that aren't going to do any damage. The lymph system interacts with the interstitial fluid that bathes the fluid in between our cells. It interacts with the immune system. Actually, it's considered part of the immune system. It also interacts with all of the organs, as well as waste removal and the utilization of nutrients. When we think about waste removal, we think about things like inflammatory compounds and infectious material. We've got broken white blood cells, congestion, and so much more that all just needs to get transported via the lymphatic system on its journey to elimination. So the lymphatic system is absolutely vital to aid the body in finding that balance between infection and the immune system's response, congestion and stagnation, absorption of nutrients and elimination of waste, inflammation, and healing. So incredibly important to recognize the value of movement. I know for myself, I found the value of lymphatics when it comes to pain. I found that early on in my herbal career, I was really drawn to some of the smooth muscle relaxers for, say, menstrual cramps. You know, things like Cramp Arc, really lovely, really appreciated the function. But when I started adding lymphatics into formulas for cramps, the lymphatics are helping to move the inflammation out of the area. Well, inflammation, 4 cardinal signs: pain, redness, heat, and swelling. So if it's all stagnant, then that's going to be contributing to those cramps being more intense. So by using a formula that is not only helping to relax perhaps the spasm of the cramp, but also helping to move the inflammation out of the area, it's helping to reduce the cramp. I actually found that adding in lymphatics for movement of inflammation is almost more powerful than the relaxing of the pain or the antispasmodic nature. Really, really love lymphatics and found them to be so incredibly important in my clients and educating my students about how to do good formulas. So due to the lymphatic system use of fluid as a medium to move waste and other things around the body, here we are back at proper hydration. Absolutely crucial to a functioning lymph, and chronic dehydration will have a negative impact on the immune system's ability to move lymph and the contents within it. So how do we move lymph? Well, the number one way to move lymph is movement. You know, the heart the heart is a pump, and the heart is the pump of the cardiovascular system to move the blood around the arteries and veins. It is a pressurized system. Well, the lymph doesn't have a primary pump. The lymph moves based on all of the muscles contracting and relaxing, contracting and relaxing. So that means that movement of the body moves lymph. What type of movement? It doesn't matter. Move your body. Now, of course, there are some types of movements that will generate more lymphatic movement, and that is things that are working against gravity. Climbing hills, rebounding, climbing stairs, jumping rope. All of these things are going to move lymph really, really well. But every type of movement is going to help move lymph. So just get out there, just move your body. That's definitely by far the most important part of it. And then there are other ways to move lymph. But I, of course, am an herbalist. So let's talk about the herbs. So these are the common lymphatics that I use regularly, but there are, of course, plenty more. How can you not love calendula? It's so beautiful. I love, like, calendula is like, it's like looking at a flower that's representing the sun. Hello. It's just so beautiful. It's part of the Asteraceae family. Just a really gorgeous plant. While it is relatively easy to grow, and you can harvest multiple flowers off of one plant, truly wonderful. Calendula has a claim to fame to being a wonderful anti-inflammatory topical herb. You see it in a lot of kids' products, diaper rash creams, boo-boo creams, salves, that type of thing. But what it also does internally is it's a lymph mover. But what its area of really focus for lymph is moving lymph around wounds. That means it's really good for moving inflammation out of an area, whether it's a bruise or road rash or any type of wound, both topically or internally. Calendula is a lymphatic herb that helps to move inflammation out of an area of concentration, which is super cool. Another one of our common and very gentle lymphatics is cleavers. And maybe you recognize cleavers by some of its common names. Well, cleavers is actually one of its common names because it kind of cleaves to you. Its Latin name is Gallium. Some of its other common names are sticky weed or cat's tongue. By far, my favorite common name of cleavers is herbalist prank plant, or the kick me sign of the herbal world. And that is because anytime you are doing a plant walk and you introduce cleavers, when you look really closely, cleavers have little tiny hairs that have little hooks on them, which is why it's called cat's tongue. When you touch it to your skin, it feels like a cat's tongue is licking you. Well, that also means that it sticks. So if you introduce cleavers on a plant walk, by the time you get to the end of the plant walk, most people will have cleavers attached to them somewhere, and some of them will not know that it's there because it's on their back. So cleavers is a really lovely, very gentle lymphatic herb. Michael Moore, one of my mentors, talked about using cleavers. The best way was to actually juice cleavers. And the cool thing is that, you know, it's so sticky, it binds together. And so you can actually bind it into a little ball and juice it pretty easily with many types of juicers. Now, with juice, you either have to drink it immediately or you can put it in the freezer. I like to use ice cube trays for this, and then just pop an ice cube out and put it in your water each day for a nice spring cleansing tonic. The other way that you can preserve the juice of cleavers is to make what's called a succus, and that is by adding alcohol until your final total is 20% alcohol. Now, you're not actually making a tincture here. You're not using the alcohol to extract out. You've used the juicer to do that. You're using the alcohol strictly as a preservative in this case, and that's called a succus. So cleavers is just lovely, and it can be relatively invasive in some areas, so wonderful plant. Look at how gorgeous it is. A great example of the world leaves, of many leaves coming out from that same leaf axis. Hands down my favorite. Of course, I'm an herbalist. I say that about a lot of herbs, but Ceanothus, really, really fantastic. Ceanothus is a North American native plant. It is part of the Rhamnaceae family, or the buckthorn family, and it is commonly called redroot. It's also commonly called California lilac or revolutionary tea plant. Wide variety, lots of history of this plant, actually many species of this plant. Now, the thing about Ceanothus is that it's very astringent. All Ceanothus are astringents, but only the ones that can be considered red roots are lymphatic medicine. And we often see that by seeing this red in the actual root. There are some other red roots that that also have some of that lymphatic medicine, but that red color is a real key depiction of that lymphatic medicine. And red root is truly wonderful. It is a general lymphatic for the entire body, and I found it to be incredibly effective, really good at helping to clean off the filters of the lymphatic system. If all your little glands or nodes are like processing plants, like filters, sometimes those filters can get clogged. Ceanothus is amazing at helping to clean off the clogged filters to allow the flow to happen. Ceanothus is all about the flow. Really awesome plant. And honestly, I could talk about Ceanothus for the next 3 hours. Actually, I have. It's been a highlight herb that I've talked about at numerous herbal conferences. But let's continue on because there's plenty of other really cool lymphatic herbs. Of course, one of our powerhouses in the herbal world is Echinacea. And Echinacea was one that honestly I wasn't really attracted to when I first started studying herbs in the mid to late 90s because it was just so popular. And so when things are just constantly in your face, Echinacea, 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 I was like, meh, until I really learned about it. And oh my goodness, Echinacea is such a powerhouse. But one of the coolest things is that, yes, it is an immune herb. That's what it's known for. But it's also a fantastic, fantastic lymphatic. Really, really good, especially for the lymph around the throat, around the mouth, but then also systemically. Echinacea is just such a wonderful plant. There's so much good things going on with Echinacea. It is generally non-toxic. It is safe for kids. So many wonderful things about it. And it has that crazy, buzzy, tingly isobutamides that kind of wakes your tongue up. Echinacea is a really good one to know about because it's also really easy to find. As far as like if you're looking for herbs, Echinacea is one of the more commonly recognized, so that's pretty cool to be able to source things that you can find, as opposed to trying to find, you know, the coolest, best thing. Like this next one, Ocotillo is not easy to find, but I wanted to bring it up because it is a Southwest native plant. It is a desert plant. Ocotillo may not be very common on the market, but it is a very common plant in the Southwest and used by Southwest herbalists. The part of the plant that is used is generally the bark, which includes the leaves and the spines. Now, this plant is The reason I like to bring it up is because it has a very specific affinity for a certain part of the lymphatic system, and that is for the lymph that is in the abdominal cavity. So it's really good for stagnation, congestion, and inflammation around the GI tract. Also really good for any inflammation or sluggishness around the reproductive organs. This would not just be for things like menstrual cramps. This would also be part of a comprehensive program for things like prostatitis. To know herbs and their affinity organs and where they tend to go can make a formula much more powerful. And Ocotillo really is that. It has such a nice affinity, and I've really noticed it to play a powerful, powerful role in a variety of different formulas that I've used it in for helping to move that inflammation. Another common plant that does have lymphatic push that is weedy in some areas, like up in Michigan, where I'm from originally, and that is burdock. Now, burdock is often thought of as a liver herb or a skin herb, and it is, it's both of those, but it also can help with moving some lymph. I don't think of burdock as a primary lymphatic herb, but it's definitely a wonderful herb. It's very supportive and nutritive to the liver, and really wonderful for helping to reduce skin inflammation. And part of that is in that lymphatic, helping to move some of that redness away from the skin. Now, the primary part of burdock that is used is the root. We have some lovely pictures of the flower head and the leaves, but the root is what's primarily used. The root is also called gobo. And gobo is a root that is commonly used in Japanese cuisine, especially in sushi. In vegetarian rolls, you see a lot of gobo. So you can often find it in organic produce departments, in Asian produce departments. You can find burdock readily available in a fresh state. Well, thank you so much for joining me. I hope today has brought you some awareness of some of these really common plants that can actually be used to a very strong effect of our immune system in a really nice roundabout and sometimes subtle way that's also really effective. So thank you so much. And if you're interested, we have a lot of stuff going on at Sage Country Herbs. And I also, of course, we're on social media. Check us out on Facebook and on Instagram and all of those fun areas. And I hope I get to meet some of you in the flesh, in person sometime soon. Have a great day. Bye.
Hey everyone. So I have to start off by saying that was a fantastic talk. I loved all of those plants being brought in by Shayna. So it's Shayna. If you haven't already seen me groveling over here and messaging Shayna and saying I'm really sorry for calling Shayna Sharon like a whole lot of times. So anyways, Shayna Lipner, Grosvenor, everyone, amazing, so good. And there's lots of questions in the Q&A. So there is a number of things. Shayna, are you able to answer some questions? Are you around? So I'm not seeing Shayna right on here. And yeah, I've been trying to answer all the questions I can as we go along. I've been trying to like, just let everybody know, how to spell this or that, or what's going on. But there's a lot of, I see Shayna just typed an I. I think that's like a I. Maybe I'm coming. Hi, Shayna. I'm here. Okay. Do you want to come on like video or audio, or do you want to type things? Because I can read you questions. Okay. So I think are you in there as a participant? We have to like magically transport Shayna right into the thing here. And so I've been trying to answer some of the questions that are on here. And a couple things. So if you have signed up for the event, you'll get an email with the presentation recorded. So you will go ahead and have that. And if you haven't signed up for the event, like you're checking out on somebody else's link, you might want to go and sign up for that. We'll post that link so you can have that link to be able to sign up and get your very own recorded copy. And some other things that are good to know, if you haven't found that Q&A, we are going to have Q&A after this talk and after the next talk, we'll be able to do that. So feel free to ask any of those questions that you are interested in, because what a cool opportunity to get to ask questions from some of these experts here today. So yeah, I'm tempted to just like jump in and answer some of these and so on. But I see a ton of I can find you, Sharon, but Shayna, oh my gosh, just stop me now, just wrap up my head in a bunch of cleavers. So Shayna, I think that you have to come in on as a panelist for me to be able to turn you on. But I can tell you some questions if we're going to work on that in the back end. I know I just really, this is like what I'm here for, to like get everybody's names right and to not bungle it all. And that is what I'm doing. So here's some questions. So let me find a really good question for you. How about tips for extreme dry eyes? Any things like beyond like eye drops and things like that? How do you think about that, Shayna? Shayna's over there typing in the chat. Let's see. So lots of questions about aloe here. And I was also thinking we could, okay, hydration, and steaming is one of the questions. So that's great. Great response for that. So I will say, so another one we can talk about is a lot of questions about aloe. There's questions about how, can you eat aloe? Are all aloes aloe? Like, do you have to have a certain type? Because some of it looks really different at the grocery store, at the herb store, than it does out in the wild. How do you know if your aloe is like an aloe you can use? And is there a way to preserve it once you actually have that? And I think it's also fine, like Howie and Stephen, if you can see any of the Q&A questions, feel free to chime in on some of those. We're never going to get to all of them in our next 4 minutes before we start with our next talk. So let's see, ice cubes. So Shayna is saying ice cubes are a great way to do this. And I think that's a great way. That's such a good idea. Hey.
There's so many great questions coming in. Hi, Bevan. There's a lot of questions coming in. Yeah.
Yeah, there are.
I think, I guess we just move on to the next.
Okay. So yes, Shayna got to answer a couple of those, and we are, guess what's next? So we have in the flesh and in the recording, Stephen Yeager. So Stephen is the Director of Quality and Regulatory Affairs of Mountain Rose Herbs. And that sounds like a really serious job, right? And it is. It's a very important thing to make sure a company like Mountain Rose Herbs has their regulatory affairs together. And I should say that, here's Shayna. Hi.
I had to get off completely and come back. I'm sorry.
You even spelled your name right. So
let's do a question for Shayna.
Okay,
well,
can you see the
Q&A?
So let's take a few minutes and you can try to pop in some of those Q&A questions. Can you see that there?
Yeah, I'm pulling them up right now. Awesome. Great. So, so basically, when it comes to aloe, yes, I would agree that aloe is, of course, cooling. And while most emulsants are cooling, the cool thing about formulation is that you could also always, if you tend to not do well with cooling herbs, or perhaps you live in a colder environment and cooling herbs aren't really appropriate at the time, you can always combine them. Like an aloe water with some cinnamon tea is absolutely lovely for both the mucilage and sliminess to hydrate your mucosa, but then also to have some of that warmingness from the cinnamon. So there's ways of working this to be able to still use that cooling demulcent action, even if you tend to run cold and don't want to have so much cooling. You can definitely do that. I do see that I want to throw it out that Most aloes can be used, but there are some that are a little bit more, that the aloe gel itself is a little bit more acidic and has more acids in it. And so not all aloes are used in this way. So you do want to really focus on the primary aloe. Barbadans is the main one that's used. You can buy aloe water if you're not confident in your identification. And what I do with aloe water, I get the preservative free, and then I just pour it in ice cube trays. And now I can pop one out whenever I need one, either use it as an ice cube, or I can melt it for anything going on, a dry sore throat, heartburn, anything like that. It works really well. Somebody else asked about Ocotillo, and going into it a little bit more. Basically, my experience with Ocotillo is that it really helps to move inflammation in the abdomen. And so I've used it for a variety of things having to do with pain and inflammation, whether it's food allergens, or it's gallbladder spasms, or it's also, of course, things like menstrual cramps or inflammation around the prostate, things that are around the abdominal cavity. Those are the things that I find Ocotillo in formulation with other things, depending on what's going on, really is a wonderful lymphatic herb. Although I will say it is harder to find, but because I'm in the Southwest, it's a little bit easier. And if you're really looking for it, you can find it, especially if you reach out to herbalists that are in the areas that it grows. I have postnasal, it disappeared. I have postnasal drip that cause inflammation and ongoing cough. Could taking a demulcent and lymphatic herbs help? Yes, part of postnasal drip often is when things are dry, you overproduce mucus. And so the more you hydrate yourself, ideally over time, the less you'll actually be producing all of that extra mucus. Also pay attention to what allergens are in your world. I mean, it could just be like dust or pollen or an animal dander. So an air cleaner is actually really good when you have unchecked postnasal drip and you don't know why. Start with getting an air cleaner. It's really helpful. What about mullein for sinuses? While you certainly could try mullein for your sinuses, it is a respiratory herb. I primarily think, personally, I use mullein leaf for the lower respiratory, meaning for the lungs. And I find it really effective in that way, but I haven't really used it for the sinuses, honestly.
I think we probably have time for like one more or two really quick questions.
Okay. People are asking about like general inflammation. So the thing about inflammation is that inflammation is your body's response. It's made in the liver and then it's sent to areas. So whether you have arthritis or dietary, digestive inflammation, what we're talking about with lymphatic herbs is about the movement of that inflammation. So it doesn't actually matter what type of inflammation, it's about the movement, because inflammation is there to do a job, bring awareness, bring immunity, and then ideally move out of the area. So lymphatic herbs are helping to move out of the area. Can you use demulcents if you have edema? Yes. That's a really big question. And so, where's the edema? Why do you want to use the demulcents are not affecting the edema, but if you had a dry sore throat and edema in your ankles, you could still use demulcents. Lymphatics might be helpful with moving some of that edema. That'd be a great thing to try. How we doing, Bevan?
I think that's it. I think we got to move on. I'm so glad you chimed in here. And, a lot of you have questions about how do I spell this? How do I spell that? What are these things that people keep saying, whether it's cheeseweed or ceanothus or Ocotillo? So go ahead and check the chat. Ask if there's something you're looking for. Maybe some herb people can go ahead and type some of the hard to identify names, because then we can know what we're actually looking for. And I've loved your creative spellings of all of them. They've all been really good. Much better than my Shayna Sharon debacle over here. So good job with your creative spellings. So thank you so much, Shayna. It's been great to have you on here. A big round of applause and thanks for Shayna and all of her awesomeness in her presentation. So I was about to make a joke about Stephen, because it is a very serious serious position that he has at Mountain Rose, but Stephen is not all serious, as you'll find out. He's quite silly a lot of the time, actually. And so, you know, he's got all these fancy things, the regulatory affairs, quality and regulatory affairs. He is also on the board of directors of the American Herbal Products Association, the United Plant Savers, the Native Plant Society of Oregon. But he's also a silly plant person, a field botanist, a wild harvester, and he is an herb school co-founder with Howie Bronstein and a fabulous herb teacher. And so, you know, it's always such a pleasure to hear the two of them together. Howie has taught botany, herbalism, wildcrafting for 4 millennia. Is that right? No, I'm for 4 decades, a long, long time. In fact, Howie even taught back with Michael Moore and has just been a fixture in the wildcrafting and herbal medicine community here in the US for a very long time. So they both co-own the Columbine School of Botanical Studies. They're awesome plant people and they like to make silly plant puns. So I hope you enjoy. I hope that's valerian I smell, because I hope it is too. I mean, ever since you two popped up on the webcam, it's been a little stinky over here. So just hoping it's valerian. So here we go.
Hi, Howie.
Hi, Stephen.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Free Herbalism Project. I hope that's valerian I smell. I'm here in sunny Eugene, Oregon at the Mountain Rose Herbs headquarters, and I'm excited to be here with you all. Howie, where are you at?
I'm in rainy Joshua Tree.
I don't believe it.
No,
Usually you see it, yeah.
I don't believe it's sunny in Eugene.
Usually we're together in past Mountain Rose videos. We're usually in the Oregon Cascades together, but today we're in different parts of the country. But real glad that we could be with you here today and excited to present to you. I do have a couple slides, so I'm going to share my screen for a second and we can get started. So yeah, welcome everybody. Some of you may know or may not know that Howie and I used to teach together at the Columbine School of Botanical Studies. We taught together for over 20 years. And Howie still is the primary teacher at the Columbine School of Botanical Studies. And you can see, Howie, would you like to describe some of what goes on at the Columbine School of BS?
That's Botanical Studies, Steve.
That's right, Howie, that's right.
Well, at the Columbine School of Botanical Studies, we're running a variety of different classes, ranging from online, inexpensive 3-hour Zoom classes for people who know absolutely nothing about plants or just know a little bit, ranging from there to a full three-year program. The gemstone of the school is still the spring apprenticeship program, where we take people out in the woods once a week and teach them how to identify, where we take you out in the woods once a week and teach you how to identify, locate medicinal and edible plants. Steve?
Essentially, you're living with the plants for a whole semester, going out every week and learning the plants that grow in the Western Cascades.
Stephen and I, for so many years, that I can't remember which jokes are his and which jokes are mine. But
well, the funny ones are mine, Howie.
That's what I remember. Yeah, that's, if I can't tell, that's what I remember. If the people laugh, it must be Stephen's. So we're going on our 38th year that I've taught this class, the 38th year that I've taught here at the Columbine School. But I do want to thank Mountain Rose Herbs for allowing us to do this wonderful Zoom meeting. Mountain Rose is just a tremendous help to herbalism in our country. The amount of energy and funds that they funnel into free clinics and herb schools and conferences is really helping invigorate and keep herbalism alive today.
The title of the class is a little tongue-in-cheek. When I first met Howie in the mid-90s, he actually had an email address, one of the few that had email addresses. And underneath his signature, he would sometimes put, "I hope that's valerian I smell." And so it's stuck all these years. And we can start getting into some content now. This is a photo of valerian root. This is Valeriana sitchensis. And this is roots that were harvested on the Columbines class in the summer that we harvest Valeriana roots. And these are actually washed roots. And we're not going to get too much into processing today, but I did want to give you this nice photo of some processed Valeriana sitchensis. Scratch and sniff's not implemented, Howie. So if it was, you would be able to get that nice musky smell that only fresh valerian provides. So I do have one more slide just because I'm going to do a little botany, just talk about the plant, just to put it in perspective. Me and Howie are both field botanists, so we focus heavily on proper identification. One of the first things you might notice is the leaves. The leaves are compound, meaning they have leaflets. And that picture on the left, that old drawing there, is actually Valeriana officinalis, which is the European species, and has these defined broad leaflets. They're kind of uniform. It has the leaf on the left-hand side is a basal leaf, and then it also has leaves on the flowering stem, which we call cauline leaves. What's interesting about valerian, the native valerian, is that compared to the European, is that the leaves are really variable. You could look at one valerian species leaf and it's lobed or it's toothed. The margins are lobed or they're toothed. And then that same species is growing just a few yards away, could have entire lobes, and the leaves could look completely different. It's very difficult sometimes to identify valerian by its leaf, especially the native species. It has these beautiful flowers. This is a corum, is the inflorescence, and when it's in bud, the flowers are pink, and then as it matures, the flowers mature, they become more white. And then you can see that on that left-hand side, the stamens, the male parts, are exerted. They stick out past the corolla or the flower. One other interesting point is that valerian is in the Valerianaceae, and that's closely related to the Asteraceae, which is the sunflower family. And if you think of like a dandelion, when it goes to fruit, it gets the kind of like that fuzz. We make a wish on it and we blow the seeds and they travel. Valeriana also has, when it goes to fruit, which is the seed, it gets a pappus-like, and that's in Asteraceae it's called pappus, and those are modified sepals.
Are you saying that the sepals in the Asteraceae are reduced to mere fuzz?
I am reduced to mere fuzz. Can you believe it? They're not green. The sepals aren't green, or they could be, but no, they're not green. They're reduced to mere fuzz. Excuse me. And then so the Valeriana has green sepals, but as it matures, it becomes pappus-like. And you can see that in the line drawing there on the left. You see the seeds brown there next to the number 5. And that's the sepals, is the hairs there that are pappus-like, similar to like what you would see in a dandelion.
Yeah, well, Stephen, my son now has 2 children.
I know, Grandpa Howie.
Yeah, I become the grandpappus.
That's nice. With the joys of life.
The joys of life. Let's get to the root of the issue, Stephen.
Yeah, let's just mention the roots. I'll go back one slide again, just because the roots are the part that we use as a supplement, or we use in our, it's the medicinal part. And the roots are a rhizome. So it's an underground stem, and that's kind of the darker part you're seeing in the photo here. And then the lighter part are actually the true roots, and that's the actual root. And so when you're actually, getting valerian extract or valerian, it's valerian rhizome, which consists of the underground stem and the roots itself. Oh, I do want to mention that valer means to be strong or healthy. Maybe it's similar to valor. There we go.
Whoa, Stephen.
Whoa.
That's what you look like.
Yeah, I don't look like a valerian root.
Well, so we should talk a little bit about valerian. We're here, but certainly we keep talking about that's valerian I smell. What's that about? Some people who don't know anything about this herb are wondering what's it about. Well, if you go to the store and buy dried valerian, and you bring it home and you open it up, it smells kind of funny, like kind of
Dirty socks, some people might say, or
Stale,
yeah,
kind of like urine maybe or something.
funk,
What's that?
a funk.
It smells like a funk.
Yeah.
Of course, people do like strong smells. So there's going to be many of you who say, "Oh, I love that smell." That's really good. But the majority of people do not like that smell. That smells kind of funny. That's why you probably want to put it in a jar. And that smell is from the valeric acid. That's the valeric acid smell. And I did want to say something about the dirty socks. The dirty sock smell does come from Michael Moore, the herbalist. And as with many people who teach, so sometimes the students don't write down exactly the right thing, but you will occasionally hear that dirty socks smell because of valeric acid, and it's technically possible that if you made a tea of dirty socks that you would get a calming tea. I disagree with that rumor. We need to stop that rumor right now, because man, that dirty sock tea does not work, let me tell you. So but you know, then we go out and dig valerian up and we get the fresh roots, and it doesn't smell like that at all. And many years ago, I read that valerian was, made this highly prized perfume in some other country. And I'm like, man, that country must have a different cultural idea of what smells good, because my valerian smells really funky. And when we started playing with fresh roots, we found out that that wasn't the case at all. Fresh roots have a completely different smell. Oh, that's right. It's the nice smell that's valeric acid. And the funky smell is isovaleric acid that happens when it dries.
The chemistry kind of changes a bit as it dries.
Yeah, it changes the chemistry and the smell changes. And the fresh root has a very musky, a pleasant, musky, earthy odor that's quite attractive.
I quite enjoy it. It's one of my favorite smells, fresh valerian root. Absolutely.
Oh, yes.
In fact, some like spikenard, not the one that grows in the United States, but in Asia, is closely related to valerian, different genus, but that has a nice musky aroma. And there is a valerian essential oil is also a thing, and that's made from the fresh roots. It's distilled.
Yeah. One day, Stephen gave me a bottle of like fresh valerian perfume essential oil from someplace. That smelled really good. I wish you could smell it. I got some here. Here. Take a smell of this. Oh man, isn't that great? Isn't it?
We haven't implemented that technology yet, Howie. Next year, maybe.
Oh, really?
We're making a lot of progress on these Zoom kind of meetings now, so you never know.
Yeah.
The little boxes.
Yeah, well, one of the things I've been worried about, Stephen, is that we may not be able to do these Zoom meetings here in a little bit, because these little boxes, I hear there's going to be a shortage of these boxes because they're all off the coast in a boat outside LA.
There definitely has been supply chain disruption, we might say.
So the fresh valerian smells good. It has a very nice musky odor, and it's very different. The overall chemistry and usage of the plants are the same, whether they're fresh or dried. But if you're a valerian snob and you're into the different fine details of the valerian, then you will be able to notice differences between fresh and dried.
Maybe we could talk about a little bit where valerian grows here in Oregon.
That's a good idea. In Oregon, well, we have a number of different species of valerian, but probably the most common one is the Valeriana sitchensis. Valeriana sitchensis. It's such an interesting plant, and it's here at Columbines. We'll look at it throughout the year, from the time it comes out from the snow to the time it dies back. It's one of those plants that we watch. And what's really interesting about it is that it is such an important part of the ecosystem, and it's such a valuable plant in relationship to more than just what a human can use it for, or even more than just what it does in the soil, because the Valeriana sitchensis grows in middle elevation meadows and wet spots. It grows in wet spots, and it comes back after fires. It comes back after disturbance in these meadows, and
seems to thrive on that disturbance, Howie.
It thrives. It's the pioneer plant.
Pioneer plant.
Yeah, it's one that comes in early, and it stays a long time too. After a fire in these wetter spots, the valerian comes in first, and with those thread-like roots, I wouldn't say thread-like, with those
Fibrous, kind of fibrous.
fibrous, squiggly roots, and it has such root mass. It holds soil right in. And the first few years, it's going to be a very visible plant. And after a while, other plants will start, after a decade or so, other plants start coming in and covering it up. But even if it turns to huckleberries, you'll often find the valerian still there growing underneath it, but it's most visible just after the fire. So that alone, as a pioneer plant after disturbance, holding the soil down, that is already a tremendous useful plant for the ecosystem. But besides that, it's just so interesting the way that the different animals interact. It's a wonderful forage for the deer and the elk up here in the Cascades. And they'll come and they'll eat the flowers and they'll eat the leaves, which invigorates the plant.
Actually, Howie, I was reading in Greaves' Modern Herbal the other day, and it said
that's a really good book.
Harvesting, yeah, it's a very good book. Harvesting the tops of the flowers during flowering will promote energy into the roots and make it a stronger plant.
Yes. Yeah. And so when we find this, we have a plant that evolved with being eaten, and then we have the animals that evolved eating this plant. And so the more that the deer and elk eat the valerian, the thicker the valerian grows and the more food there is. This type of interaction is quite interesting. And then we have the gophers in the mountains in those areas. The gophers in those areas they're living underground, and they're coming up and they're digging holes, and they're making these mounds of sifted dirt that look just like someone had a shovel or something and sifted some dirt, and they can get quite large. And this sifted dirt that's there, which is just loose dirt, is perfect growing environment for valerian that grows in there. Sometimes there's valerian pieces of roots already in there. So a lot of times you go to a pristine valerian stand at certain times of years up in the mountains, and you might think it was harvested already because of all these like mounds of dirt.
So yeah, Howie, that's really interesting, because like when I see the valerian, it seems to like form these mats. It's like they're clonal. It's like a colony, and they mainly reproduce by the rhizome spreading. So they'll send out these underground stems, and you have this colony. Sometimes it's like this one big patch that's really just one plant, or a couple plants, just a few plants, and they really seem to reproduce. Probably because they needed to evolve by being browsed. They've learned how to adapt by, spreading their rhizomes rather than reproducing by seed. Although they do both. But when you see a thriving Valeriana stand, there's some blooming here and there, sometimes a lot, but there's a lot more if you start getting on the ground and looking at the basal leaves.
Oh yes, absolutely. After disturbance, they can become the dominant plant for even multiple acres if the system is right.
I remember many days with you late in the summer, early spring, late in the summer, early fall, when it's fall up in the mountains at like 7,000 feet, or between 5,000 and 7,000 feet. And it's a hot day. It's like 101 degrees up there, it feels like. And you're just walking around, and all you smell is valerian everywhere you walk. Just the aromatics, just as you walk around, the strong aromatic smell.
Yeah, at least I hope that was valerian I smelled. If you close your eyes and imagine for a moment, and it's completely black, and then it starts to get a little bit lighter, it's like sunrise or something, and you feel like it's a little foggy, and there's like cobblestone under your feet, and you're walking and it gets brighter, and you find yourself in some like old European town, and you see this man with a flute walking through the town with all these animals following him, and you realize that it's the Pied Piper of Hamelin, and that you're there in Hamelin back in the day. It has been suggested that the Pied Piper secreted valerian roots on his person to attract those animals, those bats and animals that would follow him around. And indeed, cats do like the smell of valerian. And we've had students who will bring home the valerian leaves and their cats will like it, like it's catnip or something. But we also hear that people bring home their bag of valerian leaves and their cats just walk away a little bit and sit down, with their back facing the owner, and just ignore it completely and could care less. But that's until the owner leaves and no one's around, and then the cat loves it. So, but that's just cats. The thing is that there's more to it in the wild when we have our bobcats and even our cougars who love the scent of valerian. So you got the deer and elk hanging out in the valerian stands, wanting to eat this as food. And then at certain times of the year, the deer and elk get all huffy and they start butting each other's heads. They start digging in the soil. They'll rip up the valerian some and disturb it to make like a wet spot that they can roll in the mud.
They get in a rut.
They get into a rut, kind of like I do sometimes. Yeah, and day after day doing the same thing. Now, this rut you might think is a horrible disturbance. If a human did it, look, you've denuded the area, all the plants are gone. But the place where they rolled over, that fills in with valerian because the valerian likes that disturbance. Well, while this is going on and making even more smell, you have the cats that like to eat the deer and elk that come on down that live nearby. They also like the smell of valerian. And we've seen signs over the years of the large cats coming and literally digging up the valerian themselves. So this is quite interesting.
Then Howie, the circle of life continues on and on.
Oh, I know. It's just amazing. It's such an important stage of the meadow that the animals and the interaction of the animals will keep this meadow at the valerian stage between the animals digging it up.
They're almost managing the area to keep it a valerian spot.
Yes, yes.
So I hope we gave you a little bit of color there so you can imagine where the valerian's growing, since we can't be in the Oregon Cascades today.
No, but there's other species of valerian growing in Oregon that range from just by the riverside to we got that Valerian escalari that's growing primarily on steep, wet cliffs that are under a lot of erosion, where the soil falls away, and that's where the valerian comes in right away.
Don't want to harvest there.
No, those areas are not off limits to harvesting because they're so fragile. Some of those places you don't even want to go up and look at the valerian. You just look at it down at the bottom where it fell off, but it comes in and holds those areas. So yeah, valerian is quite.
And you also have the Valeriana officinalis.
Oh,
that's primarily on the species we saw here at Mountain Rose, grown up in Washington State, and that's a tall plant and quite as useful as the native Oregonian valerians. Yeah, I remember because we used to sometimes we'd bring the valerian home to finish processing, with the hose. Usually we go right by the river, spend all day with our vegetable brushes, cleaning out those rhizomes. It's almost like separating like tangled hair, making sure there's no other plants in there or rocks or other plants that might be poisonous. But so we get tired and come home and do it with a hose. And then if it wasn't attached to a leaf, we would throw it away, not throw it away, we'd throw it in our compost or we'd plant it because you need leaves for 100% identification because there are other plants that look like valerian. But one time we threw a little bit of valerian rhizome, a little piece of valerian rhizome just in the compost. Not even the compost that like the good compost for your food. Like this was like the blackberry wood pile. The following year, blooming valerian just growing out of the secondary compost. I mean, that's just a symbol of its resiliency. Valerian's a very hardy plant that can handle disturbance and grows very, very easily, actually.
Those are the types of skills that we can then apply to our own lives to increase our personal resilience to these changing times.
Absolutely, Howie. Well, Howie, should we talk about how valerian's used?
Valerian is a nervine. something that affects the nervous system, depending on how you want to define it. It's a calming herb. There's a lot of calming herbs that are all used essentially the same.
Valerian, like in any calming herb or nervine, has effects on the physical level and the mental level, and the mental or emotional level.
That's right. Like many of the calming herbs, I would agree. So maybe we should start with the mental emotional level first.
That sounds good, Howie. That calming herbs, nervines can be very popular because we're, today's world, there's all this emotional component, and we're all working through our stuff.
Yeah. Well, speak for yourself. Overexcitement. Valerian's good for overexcitement.
It's also really good for frustration, Howie. Frustration.
Circular thoughts that go round and round in your head that you keep coming back to again and again. That one thought that you keep thinking about, you start thinking about something else, but you come right back to the circular thoughts that go round and round in your head that you come back to again and again. I might consider valerian for that.
Yeah, maybe also grief. When you're going through a grieving process, you're not going to use valerian by itself. There's lots of other things you need to work through when you're grieving, but it can be a part of a comprehensive program when you're working through grief.
Yes. Well, good grief. You want to work through it. When you look at a calming herb, you're looking at that slowing down the physical effects of the grief. So you're taking the calming herb so you can sleep, so that you can eat, so that you can do the things that you need to do to work through the grief, and have the strong emotions not take such a physical toll on your body at that time. Oh, yes. How about the holidays?
The holidays.
Holidays.
Oh, I know. When I used to teach at Columbines 20 years ago, I'd go back home for Christmas, go to the motherland, Philadelphia. My mom would be like, when are you going to get a real job, Stephen? She didn't really say that, actually. But, we had you always have those conversations around the dinner table during the holidays. You can slip in a little, valerian leaves are edible.
Oh, yeah. They're actually.
I know it's the wrong time of year, but if you slipped in a few valerian leaves, it's much milder than the root, but has a slightly calming effect. Some people just think it's that fancy lettuce that I like to go buy at the health food store. Mom's like, you got that fancy lettuce, just put that in there. But yeah, the holidays.
Well, Stephen, the valerian leaves are quite mild for a wild food. And if you were going to not look at its medicinal effect, I would call it a choice edible for salads. Except if you do put it in your salad, you are going to take the edge off everyone at the holiday table, and it's going to come down a little bit. And maybe your uncle won't yell at your sister about when they're going to get married quite as much. But still, we here at Columbines, and I'm sure at Mountain Rose Herbs, do not recommend you changing people's consciousness or slipping herbs into without their permission.
I agree, Howie, because you will get what Howie's saying, you will get a physiological effect. It might be subtle with the valerian leaves, but you got to be responsible.
Yes. Well, that's why I don't really consider it edible. I mean, it's edible because you could eat a leaf and that'd be fine. But if you use it as food, if you made pasta out of it, everybody falls asleep.
It's not really food.
Yes.
How about sadness, Howie?
That's right.
Valerian for sadness.
Yeah, valerian is one of the things you would do for sadness. Yes. Or anger. Anger. The only problem with anger is that if someone is really angry and you say, here, take some of this valerian, they're going to say, I'm not going to take any of that herb you're giving me. I'm angry. But if you could give somebody some valerian while they were angry, that would calm them down. They might still be angry for that reason, but they won't be yelling and they won't be shaking and they won't have the adrenaline. It doesn't take away your problems. The problems will still be there. It's just how you look at the problem.
It turns down the volume a bit. Usually the person will say, that herb just tasted bitter and didn't even work, but they're all more relaxed and it's not as elevated.
Yes, this person I remember, they came up to me, they were sitting there and they were all freaked out. They were like this, they were, oh, that person, oh, this is horrible. And they were really losing it. And I gave them some Valerian skull cap and they tasted it and they went, oh, it tastes so bad. Oh, God, this, that person, blah, blah. And they started to relax a little bit and then they started to take a breath and then they started to get really mad. And they're still like, oh, that person causes me so many problems. And I hated that herb you gave me. That tasted so bad. I'm never gonna do that again. And it didn't even work.
I got some more things on my list. How about the blues?
The blues. Or melancholy. But I don't usually take calming herbs for melancholy because I consider melancholy to be bittersweet. And so it's this kind of like sad emotion that's a little bit sweet, so I'll enjoy it. But if melancholy bothers you, valerian might be the herb.
We talked about irritability. Could be useful for irritability.
Well, sometimes it's just we get so busy, and I'm exploring the term multitasking in my life. My multitasking yoga. And I have these frenzied days where I'm running around because the day is so frenzied. I mean, sometimes I'm running around in a frenzied daze. I'm just dazed and frenzied and don't know what to do. Either of those, a calming herb like valerian may be of useful.
Sometimes it might be useful for obsession. But sometimes all day at work, I'm just thinking about going home and making my model airplanes because I want to get that model airplane made just right and, you know, make it look just perfect. And then I keep coming back to these circular thoughts that I keep coming back to again and again.
I know about that. Circular thoughts that go round and round in your head that you keep coming back to. That's oh man.
How about fear? You're fearful of something, especially for me, like when you have to do these like lectures and get in front of like, sometimes I have to go do a speech or a talk and there's like hundreds of people in the room. Maybe that's not fear, but it's, you know, you got the butterflies, a little nervous. Valerian can be really useful for that, a little bit. Yeah, not like a full dose, like you take like a dropper or a half dropper full of some extract and just kind of takes the edge off.
Well, that's the issue with the dosages of these calming herbs. In general, you're not taking huge amounts that make you drowsy. You're taking just enough that it stops you from the anxiety, the fear, the circular thoughts, the physical tightness that's going on. So you take the valerian and then it doesn't do anything. And then 45 minutes later, you start thinking about that circular thought again. You're like, oh, wait a second, I haven't thought about it for 45 minutes. That's the proper dosage, the one where you don't really feel anything, but you're no longer experiencing these strong emotions.
How about those vague feelings of uselessness?
Oh man, yeah.
I know some days I'd be teaching with you, and once you start talking, 5 hours later, you just get those vague feelings of uselessness sometimes. How about headaches? I use valerian for insomnia. Sometimes I can't sleep. I might up the dose a little bit then. So I'm trying to get some sleep. I can't sleep because I got the circular thoughts that I keep coming back to again and again.
I know. Well, the thing is with these mental emotional issues, we could keep going on and on listing all these different things that maybe you could use it for. But I do want to remind people that you can use it for the physical aspect, which is muscle tightness. So we're talking about like cramps.
Yeah, cramps, spasms.
Charlie,
like sometimes you get what they call Charlie horse.
Yeah, Charlie horses in my leg. Sometimes in the morning I get that foot cramp.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes I get this like spasm. I'm coughing, and there's nothing coming up. And at this point, I don't even need to cough anymore, but I just can't stop because it's like this spasm where I'm just can't stop coughing. That's good for that.
Yep. Just your general tight, sore muscles. You know, overexertion or did a long hike and your muscles, it's the springtime. Yeah. I think I always got an eye twitch. That might be helpful. There might be other reasons why I have an eye twitch, but if it's just maybe sometimes people get stressed out, they get a little eye twitch, or you could use valerian for that.
Sometimes for strains and sprains, repetitive motion issues, valerian and other calming herbs will relax those tight muscles, will release pressure from the tendons. A lot of times with these particular problems, after the injury, the muscles tighten up and then you become prone to re-injury and increased pain. And a calming herb will help relax that.
Well, you mentioned diaphragmatic, I mean, you mentioned bronchial spasms. When you're coughing and you're not even having productive coughs anymore. But what about diaphragmatic spasms? Hiccups. You might use some valerian. You know, these kind of acute situations, kind of like Band-Aid medicine, Band-Aid herbs, you know, uses, Band-Aid uses, you might want to take the valerian, hold it under your tongue so you maybe absorb it a little quicker, but can be useful for the hiccups possibly. Well, that was a really nice kind of just like overview about calming herbs in general. What we were describing there was, you know, valerian specific, but also just any calming nervine herb. You know, we were talking like passion flower, skullcap, even chamomile. Those are kind of just general nervine uses for the mental, emotional side and the physical side. But let's get into some valerian specifics, Howie.
Valerian specifics. Yeah, well, one of the things about valerian is that it's a pretty strong and sure calming herb. And for some people, it's a little too strong. I have noticed that some people will put them to sleep. It's definitely a full strength calming herb. And it doesn't work for all people. We look at a couple different reasons. One is it's quite acrid. It's very acidic as part of its main ingredients is
particularly the roots.
Yes, we're talking about the roots.
Yeah.
And so for some people in tincture form, the acidity is just too much for their digestive system. And so for people who have pre-ulcerous conditions and heartburn, those types of issues, esophageal reflux, the valerian could upset their stomach and make it too acidic. And that's very, very possible, in which case valerian wouldn't be for you. However, conversely, some people have GI tracts that are a little deficient, not enough juices, and that little bit of acidity can be of great value. So this is things to consider with any particular herb that you're using. But many of the herbs that we take that are calming herbs or not calming herbs are quite mild in their GI tract effects, whereas valerian seems to be a little ragged on that side. It is quite acidic.
Yeah, I've noticed that some people prone to heartburn, it could kick it in.
You might want to do it with food in that instance.
Yeah, in that case,
Yeah, and be just fine. And valerian has been used for many, many years and is quite a well-researched herb.
At one time it was in the, might still be, but it was in the United States Pharmacopoeia. It was an accepted medicine at one time.
Oh yeah, so accepted that when Columbine's School of Botanical Studies was Columbine's and Wizardry Herb, and we had a little lab off of by the Wow Hall in Eugene. During that time in the 80s, you could still go to the pharmacy and buy 16-ounce bottles of valeriana tincture. Lilly, I think it was Eli Lilly's company that was making valerian right up until the 80s, valerian tincture. No, valerian can be quite stimulating too. Some people, when they take valerian, it doesn't calm them down. It wakes them up and makes their heart beat and stimulates them. And this can be a real danger.
It could increase your blood pressure a bit at first.
Yeah, that's true. Well, actually, to a lot of people, when you first take the valerian, it's stimulating. And then shortly thereafter, the calming effects kick in. But for some people, it's stimulating, and then it continues to be stimulating. And this is actually kind of dangerous, because if you're taking a calming herb to relax at that time, if you take something that stimulates you, it could make your that could make your emotional, physical issues worse. And so that can be a real problem. And for some people, taking a standard dose of valerian might keep you awake for a day. It might be like taking a strong stimulant and cause all kinds of problems. This was well recognized this is very well recognized as happening, and you often hear that some people have a allergic reaction to valerian, and the original intent with that was this essentially opposite reaction that people would get. And as I said, it was very well known. Many herbalists have experienced this doing it. We've given out thousands and thousands of dosages of valerian, and it does happen to quite a few people. I'm surprised, but this has changed in recent times when allergies are a lot more popular than they used to be. And I'm not saying that allergies are not true. Allergies are indeed true. People are allergic to gluten, and people are allergic to environmental stresses. There's no question about that. It's just much more popular to be allergic to things. And what I found in teaching in conferences is that over the last, maybe 5 to 10 years, if I asked the group in a conference, how many of you are allergic to valerian, sometimes it's up to a quarter of the people. And if I ask them, why are they allergic? What effects do you have? They'll say, well, when I take it, my stomach hurts, or when I take it, I have gas, or they'll talk about their GI tract problems that they get from taking the valerian. That's not the allergy that you read about in the books. The quote allergy, and I don't consider an allergy, is this idiosyncratic concept where you take the valerian and it works as a stimulant. And indeed, Stephen, one of the constitutional things about valerian is that it is a circulatory stimulant. It may be a calming herb, but it does make your blood move. It is a warming.
It's warming. It's very warming, and the aromatics. That's a real thing. That's one reason you want to be really careful with those individuals who take that valerian and don't get the calming side of it, because usually you're taking the herbs to relax, maybe, or to calm down. And if you're already in a frenzied state or something, and you're that type of person who reacts to the valerian, it could be damaging. So you want to
push you over the edge.
If it's the first time you're giving someone valerian, I give them a little bit and see how their body reacts.
Yeah, a couple drops.
Yeah. I mean, that's one way. Extract is one way to do it. I love valerian extract or tincture, where you soak it in alcohol, is probably my favorite way. You can make tea from valerian, Howie. But the aromatics, like with most roots, you make a decoction. So that's where you boil the roots. Then you turn the heat off, and you let it sit in the boiling water for like 10 minutes, with the heat on, and then you let it sit for a little bit with the lid on. If you do that with valerian and leave the lid off, the aromatics just go into the air.
I love it. Then I go, I hope that's valerian. I smell the whole house smells like valerian.
You got all these energy, all this valerian aromatics. It smells great. It smells like fresh valerian, but you're losing the medicine, or you're losing the uses there, because that valeric acid is just going in the air instead of in the extraction.
So I guess then I have to go the other way, which is where I just steep it.
Yeah, we just you'll do an infusion, maybe with the lid on. Maybe let some of those, you're going to get those oils collecting on the top of the lid. Let it cool down and let them fall back into the infusion. You'll actually see the oil floating on top sometimes.
Yeah, that's
the aromatics just in there.
That makes some heavy medicine that way. I know there's a lot of, back in the day, they used to say that allergy was due to some kind of enzyme, and that when you take valerian inside, there's an enzyme in your body that will change the valerian from a stimulating effect to a calming effect, and that some people lack that enzyme, and so it didn't work. It just stayed stimulating. But science changes. Science, the acceptable scientific fact and theory changes all the time. And a lot of the current belief within the herbal community has to do with constitutional effects. That if the person is already a warm person with lots of circulation, that with certain constitutions of people that the valerian would be contraindicated, that you wouldn't take it because it would push you in a direction that you're already too much of. With the popularity of herbalism and the increase in high quality local community gardens, people have been growing valerian, which is very good. It really helps with the sustainability and self-reliance. But then remember, you can use the leaves if you have it available. You can dry those leaves and use them much along the same strength of chamomile if you like the flavor and smell of the valerian. The valerian flowers are very pretty, certainly, and I've seen them for sale in our farmers markets at certain times of year as like a cut flower. Now, I think this is really good because, for example, that one day that I took all those valerian flowers that we got from the farmers market and made a bouquet, and I gave them to Stephen, and he put it up there on his countertop, and then all the flowers fall off and went behind the countertop. Do you remember that, Stephen?
Yeah, like a month later, I was like, what's that smell? There's dried valerian flowers and some leaves underneath that fell down underneath the table there, and by the, right that spot you only clean when you do the deep cleaning. And I was like, something smells in here. Oh, it was the valerian bouquet that Howie got me. Got me again.
Yeah,
I was
so that's
frustrated
what
I had to go get my valerian extract and take some.
Yeah, well, that's just it. If you like somebody, or I would say if you don't like somebody, but you want them to think you like them, you give them a bouquet of valerian flowers and they really think that you like them, but you know that those flowers are going to dry up and fall behind the counter. And then when you're walking around and you come into their house and there's that funny smell and you look at their cats in their cat box and then you say,
I hope that's valerian I smell. Well, it's been a real blast, Howie.
Blast.
It's great to see you, and great to be here with the Free Herbalism Project. I really want to thank Mountain Rose again, or I haven't thanked them yet, but thanks for this opportunity to present with you today and present with my dear friend Howie Brownstein. And I guess we'll do it again sometime, Howie. Maybe we'll get back in the woods and go hang out the plants.
And back together for one more gig, Steve.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure there's a few more. We could probably get a few more blooper reels out of something.
Well, once again, I want to thank you for showing up and working with me, and I definitely want to thank Mountain Rose one more time. But most importantly, I want to thank all of you, and even you. I know you didn't turn on your video, but still, I'm thanking all of you because you're the people that make this run. Thank you so much.
Thank you. We'll see y'all next time. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much, Stephen and Howie. There's so much I just learned about valerian, and I have a little bit of valerian, East Coast valerian jealousy going on over here. I mean, it doesn't just come in loads of fill for us and sprout up all over the place after fires and things. So, I get pretty excited when I get to lay eyes on it growing somewhere lovely. So you can see those questions in the Q&A, and you have, 8 or 9 minutes. So it's all yours.
We got 8 or 9 minutes.
Yeah, something like that. I'll jump in and be like, stop. No
Devin,
more.
thank you so much for hosting today. You've done a wonderful job. Thank you. And Howie.
Thank you. It's so fun.
So good to see you. I miss you. Howie, where are you at?
Where am I at? I'm in cloudy Mojave Desert. Where are you?
I'm in sunny Oregon coast.
Wait a second. The Oregon coast is never sunny.
This is the Oregon sunshine.
Oh, well, it isn't cloudy here at the Mojave either.
I would appreciate any questions. I could roll up here and see if you have any. But yeah.
Well, I can say I'll answer one of the questions. Someone was asking about like growing valerian in their gardens in like Ohio or the East Coast. And I think the Valerian officinalis is pretty easy to grow in gardens if you water it enough.
Yeah, it's pretty much like growing peppermint. I mean, it's a Lamiaceae, so you're just growing pretty much a peppermint or spearmint. So as long as you give it enough water and give it a good place to grow, I think it'll just do fine.
So I did notice while you're looking through those questions, finding one, I did notice people were asking questions like, I take valerian and I get nightmares, or I take valerian and it makes my heart palpitate. And I think we kind of answered those questions in the lecture. It's a circulatory stimulant. And for some people, it's gonna make their heart race too much, or it's gonna, even though it's calming in your brain, yeah, it can affect some people poorly in that way, overstimulate them.
If you all want me to pick out a few questions for you, I am happy to pick from the wide selection here. Let me know how to help.
That would be great.
Oh, well, I got one.
Okay.
I'll go ahead and answer the one that person just threw out about prescription meds. In general, I don't think valerian really is an issue with most prescription meds that I know of, except I do know that it can potentiate some of the benzodiazepines. So you'd want to be a little slow to take those at the same time to make sure it isn't too strong. But you could do it at the same time, but you just want to be careful because, you know, like it may make your drug a little stronger. So you want to test it out.
Really? And can I add something?
Oh, you should add as much as you want. I'm just waiting for you.
I think when we start talking about mixing prescription drugs and maybe your diagnosis on this forum, it's probably not appropriate. Actually, I would recommend consulting a qualified healthcare practitioner. And yeah. So I don't think we can answer that right now. Yeah.
That's very good. Let me rephrase the answer then. So although that I believe that in most cases you can mix these with most drugs and some caution with certain drugs, a healthcare practitioner will easily be able to help you through that maze.
Yeah, we're not going to be able to answer that question basically just on today.
Well, I see a number of people asking about what is the best way to make valerian. Do you like it in capsules or tincture or tea? I mean, you touched on it a little bit, but what are your favorite ways?
Yep. Yeah, Howie, why don't you start off with that? Aromatics.
Aromatics? Well, you know, ultimately the best way to take it is the way that you're going to take it. Like, there's all these different ways of preparing it, but is the person going to take it, right? So if it's a bad tasting tea, even if it's really strong, if the person's not going to drink it, it's not going to make a difference. So the best preparation is the one that you're going to want to take. So that's what I would say. I'll throw it back to you.
But with the valerian, because it is so, some of the uses or some of the effects come from the aromatics. It's interesting because usually you would make an infusion or you make a decoction of roots. Mm-hmm. You know, when you're preparing valerian root, that's where the main constituents are. But when you're making a decoction of valerian, if you just boil it without a lid on, you're just boiling away the aromatics.
Yeah.
So it's quite different than most preparations with a root. Is that if you're going to make a tea, I would recommend keeping doing more of an infusion, leaving the lid on, keeping those aromatics in the tea.
Oh, so Stephen, I mean, I read in these herb books and from these other herb teachers that you're supposed to take roots and just boil roots. And then you're just supposed to steep like other things like leaves and stuff. But what you're telling me is that valerian's an exception?
Yeah, it's different than other roots. Yeah.
Oh, so it's going to be a lot stronger if I just keep the lid on it.
Yeah, it's different. You want to make an infusion rather than decoction. It's actually kind of different than other decoctions or other roots.
You could take it like a.
So I've heard from lots of herb teachers, and I see people writing in about this as well, is that some people have the opposite effect about valerian. So I want to hear your opinions. Is this like herbal myth or reality? Where does
No, it's not a myth.
Definitely not a myth. Yeah,
well
I'll defer to
documented.
Holly. Yeah, it's not a myth.
No, I would.
Any thoughts of who? Like why? Can you predict it?
Okay, well, like we said, some people would say in the past that it had to do with some kind of enzyme and that some people missed the enzyme, so it was stimulating. But that's not the general belief. So someone asked something about methylation, over or under methylation, but most people don't go with that route anymore as like the metaphor as to why this is happening. Most people would say it's a constitutional issue, that it is a circulatory stimulant and it is warming. And so for some people who already have like excessive, really good circulatory stimulation or can't handle the physically stimulating qualities of it, that it would cause issues. My concern with that is it's more like if you're going to take valerian, you're going to take it to calm down. So to take a stimulant when you're trying to come down can push you over the edge. So the stories you'll hear about from the older herbalists and the stories you'd hear from us is the real concern about people who are already having major psychological issues at that time. People who are really having a hard time and then taking the valerian and then feeling like they're going crazy. Maybe even ending in having to go back on medication or something because they took a stimulant when they needed to take something to calm them down. So, yeah. Did you want to say something, Stephen?
Oh yeah, some people you want to give them valerian for something, like to relax them, and you give them valerian and it does the opposite.
Yeah.
There's a percentage of people you give valerian to that it affects them the opposite of what you thought was going to happen. So you're going to be careful with that.
Yeah.
Right?
How do you know? Someone asked the question, how do I know if the herb is
small amount?
Yeah, just give the person a couple drops and see how they act. Yeah. And if it's too acidic for you, you take a couple drops, it's going to be like burning your mouth. Steve, how do you know if an herb is too acidic?
You take your drops and you put it in your body and you feel how it feels.
So last question. Do you use it externally, topically, and fresh, dry, anything like that? You take a bath in it to smell sexy?
I would, don't tempt me with the bath thing. But externally, I don't think valerian works externally in my experience. What was the other question? Bath, external.
Okay. Well, I want to thank both of you for helping us understand a lot more about valerian. I mean, really getting in depth on all these different species of valerian and different types and more nuances about how to use it. It's such a cool plant. It's definitely, I think it's not like an entry-level herb. That's one of the things I love about it. You know, it's not like when you're like, you should try peppermint. People are like, yeah, I'm going to try peppermint. You know, this is like another thing, you know, it's like when you start getting into your stinky bitters or, you know, alkaloid-rich plants. So valerian's a really fun one because relative to things that have higher level of toxicity, you know, you can play with it. It's still smelly and you can show people how cool you are when you can like Valerian. So thank you both for being here and sharing all of your planty stuff and being here live and answering those questions. And feel free to type answers to any of the Q&A ones that are left that you feel like you have the finger energy for. So next, we have a fantastic teacher who actually can't be with us here today, but I know that she is thinking of us. I had the pleasure to visit Erica Galentin in southeastern Ohio earlier this year and walk the greenhouses with her and check out her office and just generally bask in her awesomeness and all of the things that she is able to offer us in the herb world. So Erica is going to explore aromatic plants as useful tools supporting minds and bodies. And she's going to get into kind of the interworkings of smell, emotions, how plants can even support us on our own path to wellness in those ways. So, these are fantastic topics, and she's a wonderful teacher, clinical herbalist, aromatherapist, and she has Sovereignty Herbs in Athens, Ohio, which is right next to a fantastic medicinal plant greenhouse companion plant. So you should definitely check that out if you're ever out there. Erica has a degree in herbal medicine from the Scottish School of Herbal Medicine, over 15 years of clinical practice experience, and she is a member of the American Herbalist Guild and the National Institutes of Medical Herbalists. So you are in for a real treat with her talk, which is Aroma, Psyche, and Body, Creating New Narratives. And if you have questions, you can add those to the Q&A. We'll be curating those questions and sending them on to Erica so she might be able to respond to a few of those later on. But for now, sit back, enjoy, and bask in the wonderful botanical knowledge that Erica will share with you.
Hello, everyone. I'm Erica Galentin, clinical herbalist and co-creatrix at Sovereignty Herbs, and I am delighted to be here with you all today for the Free Herbalism Project of Mountain Rose Herbs, and to share in a really wonderful subject that is very near and dear to my heart in both my clinical work as well as in my personal life. So without further ado, welcome to Aroma, Psyche, and Body, Creating New Narratives.
So I would like to begin with giving you a quick overview or map of our journey today, which in some ways as we go along might seem a bit disjunct. But I promise if you stick through the whole class, we bring everything together at the end, it will all make a lot more sense. So the first thing that we're going to go through is the physiology of olfaction, or this is how our sense of smell actually works, or at least what we know about how it works. And we're also going to talk about aroma as messages that are imprinted with both emotion and memory. We're going to then move on to defining the psyche and kind of what I mean by psyche when I'm talking about aroma, psyche, and body. And in that, we're going to look at the importance of story, myth, and metaphor in interacting with the psyche, but we're also going to be looking at how the psyche can impact our physiology, or how the psyche is known to impact how our body works in both health and disease. From there, we're going to move on to the idea of our memories, so our personal memories, your memories, my memories, as stories, metaphors, and what's called the personal myth. And with that, going a little bit into memory science and talking about priming and encoding exercises as rituals for creating new memories. And finally, at the end, we're going to bring it all together. We're going to bring aromatic plant-based preparations and enjoyments into the picture, and how we can actually utilize or go to the plant kingdom to help support us in accessing the psyche and creating new narratives for ourselves. So before we dive into all of these wonderful, exciting details, I like to be able to kind of zoom out and provide a bigger picture for my perspectives as a clinical herbalist and my work with plants and people. And one of the things that I like to say is that I definitely see all of my clients as being on this wellness journey, or what is sometimes referred to as the wounded healer's journey. And this term, wounded healer, is coming to us from Greek mythology and the legends of Chiron, as we can see here on the right in this beautiful drawing of Chiron. And Chiron in the Iliad was thought to be the wisest and justest of all the centaurs. And through various and sundry adventures, he was accidentally shot by an arrow, Hercules' arrow, which was actually poisoned. And because Chiron was immortal, he didn't die from this wound, but instead suffered a painful, incurable wound that basically made him destined to suffer for life. And you know, in this story of agonizing pain, Chiron takes this wound and turns it into a gift that, you know, he goes around and in learning how to heal himself is looking at healing other people as well, and becomes a steward for the healing arts, and is known as the teacher of Asclepius and of course Achilles. So Chiron roamed the earth, curing and healing others despite his own suffering and pain. And the point of this is that really in many ways, Chiron embodies the wounded healer's journey. And I see this parallel all the time in my clinical practice. When we're looking at, you know, clients that are coming to me with all various and sundry stories, I tend to see them as their own wounded healer. They're on their own wounded healer's journey. And so I'm not the healer. The clients are the healers. And what my work is all about is providing them with extra tools to help them along the way, including herbs, aromatics, foods, and lifestyle practices. Another piece that's really important here is that from my perspective in my clinical work, the psyche is never far from the physical body, and the psyche and the body are greatly impacting each other all the time. So we can't look at physical wellness without really acknowledging what's going on in the psyche, and less about just cause and effect, but more about this bidirectional relationship that they have. And in many ways, my work as a clinical herbalist is about supporting people on their journey to embodiment and creating a more loving and wholesome relationship with the physical body. And this is a heck of a journey for a lot of people, for many people, I think for all clients that come to see me. They have disembodied in some way and for some reason. And this is often because there are, you know, various and intense pressures, you know, to disembody. Maybe these be, you know, personal trauma-based reasons, cultural reasons, social reasons, economic reasons. But there's so many different kinds of pressures, you know, on the human being to disembody and to kind of sever that relationship between psyche and body. So with my work, and as we kind of look at using aromatics in the sense of supporting both psyche and body, we have to kind of frame this as the idea of supporting and building empathy towards the body, towards the psyche, even towards the spirit. And rather than looking at it as, you know, using aromatics to treat problems or using herbs to treat problems, it's very different. These are tools we have access to be able to guide our own work, and providing our bodies and our psyche and even our spirits with the resources needed to traverse this wounded healer's journey. So And I find myself very often engaging with aroma from plants in many ways in my clinical practice. And at this time, I really would love to give credit to my mentors, Kathy Skipper and Florian Berkmeyer of Aromanosis, for really kind of spearheading the way forward for me in this regard. But we're going to be looking at the idea of using aromatics from plants in a multitude of forms beyond just essential oils, as really important and potent tools to support the psyche, to support our emotional beings, and to support this building of empathy towards the body and towards the self. The physiology of olfaction, how our sense of smell works. So our olfactory system, which is our basically the system of our nose and mind, if you will, that perceive aroma. And this system consists of several different features. One, the olfactory epithelium, which I'm going to talk about in a little bit more detail. We also have the olfactory bulbs and tracts, along with olfactory areas of the brain. And I'm also going to talk about those because it's very important in how we perceive aroma. The olfactory system also includes the olfactory nerve. This is cranial nerve 1. And what makes this very interesting is that unlike the other cranial nerves, our sense of smell only serves a sensory function. And because of this, it is thought to be one of the earliest senses to evolve. So that's quite amazing when we start to think about how in modern times, as human beings, how many of us do not rely on our sense of smell for information. We tend to rely on our eyes and our ears and even our sense of touch, but our sense of smell isn't always what we first turn to. But ironically, in our evolution, it was one of the first senses to evolve, and albeit at that time, during our evolution, probably the most important sense that we had. So I want to take a second to really talk to you about this olfactory epithelium. What is that? Oh my goodness. Well, this is basically 2 patches of tissue that are located on the roof of the nasal cavities, almost right behind the third eye area or between your eyebrows. And this epithelium is critically involved in the conscious detection of aroma. So when we smell something, it is via this olfactory epithelium. An epithelium refers to just to a tissue type. It's kept moist by mucus secretions, and these mucus secretions are replaced every 10 minutes. So this is a very active membrane. It's not one that just sits there idly. It's constantly getting washed over by new mucus. There's a lot of activity that's meant to be going on around this particular area of tissue. And what's really cool about this mucus is that it facilitates the interaction of volatile molecules, or these are molecules that are airborne that end up in the nasal cavity that then can be perceived as aroma. So in order for us to be able to smell things, the mucus itself is involved in this process. And this is kind of a cool thing to think about. So in addition to this olfactory epithelium, in another area of our olfactory system in our nasal cavities is an area referred to as the turbinates. And the turbinates are actually lined with wonderful, interesting dynamic tissues as well. And it's more this area of our sense of smell or our sense perception, olfaction perception, is actually more sensitive to pheromones or the unconscious olfactory detection of substances. And of course, the response in our brains and neuroendocrine system as a result. So we're going to be focusing mostly today on what happens when these airborne or volatile molecules hit the olfactory epithelium and we have a conscious perception of aroma. And these are just some really cool pictures to show you so you can get a better idea as to where exactly this epithelium is located. As you can see on the right-hand side, it's kind of up behind that space between your eyebrows. And here on the left, you see these wonderful blue cells that have these looking like hair projections into this kind of waviness of mucus. And those hairy finger-like projections are the cilia, and that's where all of the receptor sites are for our sense of smell, or for the receptor sites for those volatile molecules that then translate as aroma. So one thing about these, well, a few things about these olfactory receptor cells that are on this on these cilia that's kind of hanging down from this olfactory epithelium, is that they're actually replaced every 4 to 8 weeks. So as I mentioned, there's this really dynamic turnover of mucus in that area, but we also see this really fast turnover of actual receptor cells in that area. So it's all very active and all very dynamic, and I think that dynamism is a really important point. I also think it's very interesting that as far as the physiological sciences are concerned, we still don't exactly know how the human brain, or how we as beings actually identify different odors. The translation of a chemical molecule into a nerve signal, and how those nerve signals then combine to create a message that goes to the brain. There's a whole bunch of mystery that still remains about this particular sense, and I just think that's so exciting. You know, the fact that we don't know everything that there is to know about how we perceive aroma, and that mystery is just very alluring to me. But one of the things that I really want to highlight here very strongly, because it's going to come back around and it's really, really, really important, is that when it comes to our olfactory receptor cells, they stop firing once they've detected an aroma, right? They stop firing by 50% after the first few seconds of stimulation. So let's think about this. So within the first few seconds, we're going to stop smelling what we're smelling by 50%. Within the first few seconds, that decreases by 50%, and then it depreciates very quickly from there. I'm sure many of you have kind of maybe had the experience where you walk into a public restroom and you're greeted with this incredibly unpleasant aroma that just seems absolutely so unbearable. You just have to run right out of there, but you just have to grin and bear it. And the longer that you're in there, the longer that you actually stop smelling it. Or the less, the less you can smell it. So it's the same kind of thing as once we get hit with something, within that first few seconds, we stop smelling that exact same thing very, very quickly. And this is, I think, going to be a very important point when we move on to how we actually use aromatics and what we rely upon. Especially in the cases of things like, distilling, or not distilling, but burning essential oils all day long, when really it's only after the first few seconds that they're going to be making such a dramatic impact. So here are a few other really cool pictures, again, just to kind of provide some context. So you see the olfactory epithelium and the olfactory bulb. So after the message is picked up by the olfactory epithelium, which you can see on the right-hand side here with those cool little like spider-looking cells, the signal is then carried up into these nerve pathways that then kind of can join at something called the olfactory bulb, which is kind of like a relay station for messages. So we have one of those on each side. And again, this is that very active area right in between our eyes. And I think that that's really quite an interesting thing, especially when we start to think about some of the tapping exercises that we can start to do with aromatics. So from the olfactory bulb, we have the nerve signal that is then transferred into areas of the brain that are responsible for memory and emotion. And this is just to give you a bit of a picture. We're looking at the amygdaloid, the amygdala, the hippocampus, and these areas that are collectively referred to as the primary olfactory cortex. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about that here in a second. So the primary olfactory cortex is basically defined as the combined areas of the brain that are responsible for odor-related memories and emotional responses. Sometimes people refer to this kind of collectively as the limbic system. And what's really incredible about olfactory signals, or these aromatic messages that come through that epithelium and into the brain, is that they do not travel through the thalamus before making connections in the cortex. And what this means is that the signals we get from our sense of smell bypass our rational analysis and aim directly for areas of the brain that affect our instinctive behavior. So with this, basically, our sense of smell is hardwired into the centers of our brain responsible for memory and emotion. And it's actually quite amazing because these emotional responses and memories are actually triggered before we can consciously identify what it is we're smelling. So even if we can smell something right away, we're like, oh, that's lavender. Even before in those milliseconds before we've consciously decided what it is, we're already having an emotional and memory response to that signal. And it all happens so quickly. It's really quite incredible. And in this regard, aroma in itself is incredibly evocative, and its ability to create this very fast memory reflex, sometimes referred to as the Proust effect, is really potent, and like I said, and very, very, very fast. And there's also the same kind of similar unique intimacy with our emotions as well. And in this research that I've been, diving into and looking at things, I definitely have come across some interesting support for how powerful aroma is in impacting us in both our memory and emotion. And one study here that I have hyperlinked really demonstrates how aroma can go beyond words and images. And this research suggests that emotions triggered by our sense of smell are different and more powerful than emotions evoked by verbal evoked by verbal and visual information alone. And so again, this is just speaking to this very, very powerful sense that we have, our sense of smell, and how easily we oversee it, and we overlook it, and ignore it even to some extent. And what's also really interesting about all of this is that there's a ton of connections out there between our sense of smell and mental health. And kind of mental health outcomes. And so I've hyperlinked a variety of different studies here that really kind of demonstrate this connection in certain ways, that there's a connection between our sense of smell and our memory or cognitive function. There's a relationship between, obviously, between olfactory impairment or damage to our sense of smell and quality of life. We also see reduced ability to smell in situations like chronic clinical depression, and that there's often kind of alterations in our sense of smell associated with depressive states. And we definitely see this with, mental health issues as well, like schizophrenia, where there's often impaired odor identification. And in some ways, there's this one fun study at the bottom here that even looked at how our sense of smell or lack thereof may impact our motor function as well. And so there's just a very real connection. It's not necessarily been quantified or qualified precisely, but there's definitely a building body of evidence to really support how powerful and profound and important our sense of smell is for our mental and emotional well-being. What is psyche? Okay, so we're going to switch gears here and we're going to talk about psyche. What is psyche? So psyche can be defined as many things. So there's some interesting definitions here. I really like the one animating spirit. This word psyche is derived from Greek, the Greek meaning the soul, also sometimes interpreted as the mind or the spirit. Life, one's life, the visible animating principle or entity which occupies and directs the physical body. I love this definition. In fact, that's probably my favorite, so I'll read it again. The psyche is the invisible animating principle or entity which occupies and directs the physical body. And then, of course, we have some that define the psyche as the mind, just the mind, or as the seat of thought, or a faculty of understanding and reason. And I'm going to go ahead and talk about why I don't like that definition of just the mind in just a second. But before I do, I want to talk to you quickly about a Greek story, the story of Psyche and Eros, and we see them carved in stone here on the left. And the story of Psyche it's a wonderful story, actually. It's a story of love lost and trials and tribulations and many, many things. It's a very, very deep and rich myth. But the basic gist of it is that Psyche was thought to be the most beautiful mortal woman alive, and she was so beautiful that people started worshiping her as a goddess. And because of this, Aphrodite got really upset, and she decided that she was going to sabotage Psyche's life out of jealousy. And so she sent her son Eros, also known as Cupid, to shoot her with an arrow so that she would fall in love with a hideous beast, a hideous monster, and be doomed to live a life of matrimony with a hideous monster. But what ends up happening is that accidentally Eros nicks himself with the arrow, and he falls deeply in love with Psyche. But knowing that he wasn't meant to, and that his mother would be very angry with him, he has to strike a bargain with Psyche that he can only come and visit her at night. And in doing so is not going to ever show his face to her. And as Greek mythology goes, it seems to work out where, she's whisked off to this beautiful palace, this beautiful place, and she spends the days on her own in this beautiful place. And at night, her husband and the love of her life comes and visits her, but she never sees his face. And one day, her sisters came to visit, and they were a very jealous type, and they decided that they wanted to trick her because they thought, well, of course you must be married to a hideous monster if he's not letting you see him. And they poked fun at her and finally decided to convince her that she had to look at him. She had to sneak a look at him. And so that night, Eros was lying next to her. She leans over with an oil lamp to have a look at his face. And when she does, she sees this beautiful, godlike creature. And with her surprise, ends up dropping a bit of the oil onto Eros, and Eros wakes up and sees that he has been caught, and becomes absolutely furious and flies away and deserts Psyche. And of course, Psyche is then absolutely distraught because she's lost the love of her life. And so she goes to Aphrodite and begs and pleads for them to be reunited. And of course, Aphrodite, still being a little bit miffed off, decides that she's going to have Psyche go through a variety of trials in order to be reunited with Eros. And what ends up happening is that there are 4 different trials that she has to go through, and they're all very, very difficult. And she doesn't think she's going to make it every single one of the way. Helpers that come and give her a hand. And eventually she makes it through the 4th, which she kind of blunders a little bit, but nonetheless is able to go to Aphrodite and say, I have finished your tests, and can I please be reunited with Eros? And then, of course, they are, and they live happily ever after. And so this is Psyche's quest is definitely, that's a very brief overview, but basically it's a story of transformation and the evolution that she has to go through in the face of adversity. And you can read more about this, the myth of Psyche and Eros from the Metamorphosis, or also known as the Golden Ass. And I have Adlington's translation hyperlinked here for you. So what's really interesting as well, in addition to, the word Psyche coming from this Greek mythology and the story of Psyche and her quest, the word Psyche in Greek also translates for butterfly. So we have this word that means the mind or the soul, which also refers to butterfly. And I like this idea of kind of connecting Psyche with ongoing transformation, just like Psyche had to go through her quest to evolve, and just like the butterfly evolves from chrysalis to its flight form. And so defining Psyche, I look to the work of Carl Jung. I'm a student of Carl Jung and probably will be for lifetimes. And there is a hyperlink there so you can read more about him and his contributions to psychology and, depth psychology in particular and psychoanalytic theory. But Carl Jung defined the psyche as the totality of all psychic processes, those that we're conscious of, as well as those that are happening in the unconscious, that we do not have conscious access to. And I tend to like to use the word psyche rather than mind, because the word mind itself tends to be used in common parlance to refer to aspects of mental functioning which we are conscious. So, I tend to think of mind as more like ego consciousness and less about, psyche's more the totality of all of that, what extends beyond our ego consciousness and all that's going on that we don't have conscious access to. So in this regard, the psyche also is more than just emotions. This is about much more than that. According to Carl Jung, the human psyche is the starting point of all human experience, and all the knowledge that we gain, just like Psyche, eventually leads back to it. So this is a much bigger, it's almost much bigger than us, the psyche. And in fact, there are elements of the psyche which Carl Jung referred to as the collective unconscious, which is way bigger than the individual. And what I really like about the Jungian approach to defining psyche or thinking about psyche is that, he believed the psyche to be a self-regulating system. Rather like the body, it seeks to maintain balance between opposing qualities while at the same time constantly striving for growth. So we know about homeostasis and allostasis in the human body, but that this is something that is also going on in the psyche. And this ability to maintain balance while constantly striving for growth is a process Jung referred to as individuation. And I like this because this to me speaks to the plasticity of the psyche. This is not just a static thing that we're born with. It's constantly growing and evolving and changing, just like the human body is. And that capacity for growth and change is something that we rely on, I think, as herbalists and aromatherapists in working on ourselves, but also working with our clients. Myths as stories from the psyche. So now that we've kind of talked about the physiology of olfaction or how our sense of smell works, and I've defined psyche for you in the ways that I'm referring to in my work, I want to talk to you quickly about the next subject, which I said is all going to tie together in the end if you can be patient enough with me. And I want to talk to you about this idea of myths as stories. So a myth has been defined as a traditional story that depicts the early history of a people, that explains some sort of natural or social phenomenon, and typically involves supernatural beings or events. So like we talked about the myth of Psyche, I talked to you about the myth of Chiron, and here we have Aphrodite. This is a Riviere painting of Aphrodite with all of her loving animals around her. And here is another definition of myth, and this is one that I find that's very important in regards to kind of describing how I work with aroma. So I see myth as a traditional story of historical events that serves to unfold a part of a worldview of a people or person, or which explains a practice, a belief, or a natural phenomenon. And we often think about myth as a cultural manifestation, but when we kind of zoom back into the individual, myths are also relevant to the individual, and we create our own mythos as we live our days in and out, day by night, creating our own stories. So this idea that myths are stories that are serving to unfold a part of a perspective or a way of seeing the world, a worldview, and it can explain why you believe what you believe, or why you practice what you practice, so to speak. And myths are traditionally considered to be, on a cultural scale, a global scale, incredibly important. In the sense that they are interpreted in kind of Jungian psychology or analytic psychology as stories from the psyche, messages from the psyche. So Carl Jung says here, myths are the first and foremost psychic phenomena that reveal the nature of the soul. And we can look at this from a cultural, wider worldview, or we can zoom this right back into the individual, to your myths and your stories. These are psychic phenomena that reveal the nature of your soul. Here's another really great quote about myths from one of my favorite authors, Joseph Campbell. He says, "It has always been the prime function of mythology and rite to supply the symbols that carry the human spirit forward in counteraction to those that tend to tie it back." And I love this because he not only does he bring in mythology here, but he brings in rite in the sense of ritual or ceremony. So this is about carrying the human spirit forward, and we can rely on myth to do this for us via the psyche. And then the last one here from Joseph Campbell, which I always love any kind of quotes from him, but these mythological symbols stem from the psyche. They speak from and to the spirit, and they are in fact the vehicles of communication between the deeper depths of our spiritual life and this relatively thin layer of consciousness by which we govern our daylight existences. And so there's this really beautiful sentiment here that Joseph Campbell gives us about this communication between our psyche and our kind of ego consciousness, the depths of ourselves and what happens in our day-to-day life. And so myths as stories from the psyche, myths are really, really important here for the growth and evolution and healing in the psyche, and therefore in the body. And so here we have on the left, this is a depiction of, this is a Stanhope painting. It's a depiction of Psyche and her 4 trials that she has to go through in order to be reunited with her lost love, or as some would say, to be reunited with her animus, the sacred animus or the sacred inner masculine. But and again, we're zooming out this idea of myth as a cultural phenomenon, but we can also zoom right in and think about the personal myth. So living your personal myth, this is a wonderful quote here. Living your personal myth, in fact, is all about the crises, the transitions, and the suffering. It's about integrating your personal myth into yourself as you move along the path. And so we all have our own myth and our own story that comes into play when it comes to our own wounded healer's journey. Psyche and body. So for those of you who really rely on Western science to define what is real for you, there are several fields of health sciences that are specifically studying the connection between psyche and body. And so there's real kind of Western scientific support for the phenomenon that our psyches and our bodies are constantly interacting and constantly impacting one another. And the first one is a field of study referred to as psychoneuroimmunology. And this is really the specific study of the effect of the mind, or what we could say maybe ego consciousness, on health and resistance to disease. And in this Daruna here, this quote from him, he writes, "It is a scientific demonstration of the ancient view of organismic unity. Unity results from intercommunication among bodily systems that operates to sustain life. Health maintenance is facilitated by habitual practices that bolster the organism's ability to withstand the stress of life." And these habitual practices, i.e. rights, that, for example, Joseph Campbell talked about, and that we're going to talk about further on in this class, is a really critical piece here to building resistance and withstanding stress. There's also the field of health psychology, which is looking at how biological, social, and psychological factors influence health and illness. So health psychologists use psychological science to promote health, prevent illness, and improve healthcare systems. So again, this is just a nod to the fact that, you know, this connection between psyche and body is real and is being studied in various and sundry ways, you know, in Western science. And it's quite fascinating, you know, what these fields of study are up to. And so I highly recommend you look into them. But one of the things that I really want to touch base on is my actual real lived experience as a clinical herbalist and what I see happening, or what I witness happening or taking place in my clinical practice. And, you know, one of the emotions that, or I say like emotional states or ways of being that happen to show up quite a lot in my clinical practice is grief. And I've been really interested in the grieving process and its impact on physical health for a very long time. In fact, I've spent an enormous amount of time digging through the literature on the subject, and have really come up with some pretty interesting rabbit holes to kind of fall into. But one of the things that I think, you know, is really important is looking at this idea of grief as a response to loss. And I see loss a lot. Loss is very present in the lives of almost all my clients. It's very rare that, you know, one of my clients doesn't have a story of some sort of loss that has been with them that they are working to integrate in some way, shape, or form. And, you know, according to the DSM-5, you know, there is this idea that, okay, so not everybody has the same grieving process, and grief isn't always going to look the same for every person. But in some situations, the process of integrating loss can become complicated, and sometimes to the point where they're actually, you know, it actually becomes disordered and can be quite severe and significant. And what's really interesting is that in these cases of kind of severe, significant, unintegrated grief, you can see a lot, especially in the research, you can see a lot of connection between grief and disease. And so there's lots of hyperlinks here for you to look at, but grief and kind of disturbed grief or prolonged grief has been indicated in, in decreasing immune function, including in the development of cancer. We see it in inflammatory conditions regarding, you know, the cardiovascular system, the joints, several others, as well as mental health outcomes. So, so grief has kind of been implicated as a contributor to immune, inflammatory, and mental health phenomenon. And indeed, it's actually also very, very strongly linked with cardiovascular disease. In fact, there's something called the broken heart syndrome. This is actually quite real. So, you know, dying of a broken heart, or your heart literally exploding with grief. So immune implications, inflammatory implications, mental health implications, of course, and cardiovascular outcomes. So we definitely have this connection now between a very common emotional experience and physical, also very common physical health experiences. Another example of this, it comes up a lot in my clinical practice, is shame. And this is I actually teach a whole class on this alone because it's a really fascinating subject from start to finish. But what I will say is that there has been some research into shame and its kind of pro-inflammatory effects on the body. And the way that the researchers framed shame, and shame is, oh my goodness, shame is present in all our lives. I think it's probably one factor that connects all of humanity together, is that we all experience shame in one way or another at some point in our lives, and some of us more than others. So the way that the researchers were framing this, or framing shame, is that looking at it as how our physiology actually responds to what they called an acute threat to social self. So shame is the physiological response to an acute threat to social self. Much like fight or flight is a physiological response to our physical selves. And in several human experiments, this acute threat to social self actually increased pro-inflammatory cytokine activity and cortisol. And these changes occurred in concert with shame. And the resultant changes in behavior that they saw in response to shame kind of were driven. So our behaviors were driven by, or the behaviors of the participants in the studies were driven by, this heightened pro-inflammatory cytokine activity. And we see this in other conditions, like clinical depression, for example. So feelings of shame and shame-related emotions really predicted disease-relevant declines in immunity and health in these studies. And I think that that's really, really critically important, considering how much shame most of us carry around with us all day, every day. Something to think about. Because this really hints to the possibility that shame can play a really significant underlying role in chronic and systemic inflammatory disease processes. So again, this is just really kind of demonstrating or underlining how shame can and how our emotions can impact our psychological or our physical well-being. Our memories as our personal myth, conversations between psyche and body. So I've talked about psyche, I've talked about myth, I've talked about how psyche impacts body, and now we can kind of start to engage with how we can work with psyche and work with myth and work with our personal myths and work with aromatics to start to make changes where we need to make changes as tools for our own wounded healer's journey. So, you know, our memories are really quite amazing, and there's all kinds of memory sciences out there that are studying, you know, different aspects of memory, especially about, you know, how to retain new memories. And there's just multiple systems in the mind that are working together to help kind of create and concretize memories. And these memories are stored as a series of connections that can be activated by different kinds of cues, including olfactory ones. And I mentioned this earlier, you know, the Proust effect, or that involuntary memory reflex that we get from aroma. And we have two different types of memories, they say. One declarative, or those that are, you know, controlled consciously. And then we also have non-declarative memories, or these are memories that are actually, you know, kind of going on in the background, that they influence our perceptions and our behaviors without our knowledge, without our awareness or our intention. And you know, one of the goals of you know, this process of individuation that Carl Jung would speak about and has written about extensively is this idea that we have to make what is unconscious conscious, and that work is a lifetime's worth of work. So in these memory sciences, there are, you know, these exercises referred to as priming and encoding exercises, and I really kind of see these as an opportunity to make new memories, right? This is what priming and encoding exercises are all about. And they're actually, you know, kind of ritualistic if you think about it. And when I say ritual, I'm not referring to necessarily anything spiritual. I'm speaking more to kind of elaborative rehearsals or elaborative tasks that help one to make a situation prominent or sacred or you know, meaningful. So priming and encoding exercises are rituals that we can think about for making new memories. And priming is really this automatic or unconscious process that can enhance the speed and accuracy of a response as a result of past experiences. So priming a memory really, or priming for memory, really helps to trigger associated concepts and it makes the retrieval process more efficient. And we're going to talk about rituals that really help prime in a second. And there's also encoding exercises, which are kind of geared at the long-term memory as a system that encodes and stores and retrieves information. And so this is, you know, it's creating a new memory and then how it's stored and how easily it's retrieved. And one of the things about priming and encoding rituals is that, you know, they really are about creating rituals. In order to make, you know, the memory more impactful, you really have to focus on the meaning of the item. You have to, you know, form associations between old information and new information, and, you know, really make these kind of elaborate connections. And I can tell you how that can happen in just a second. And the way that information is encoded really critically influences later access to that information. And so one of the things they say is that you're more likely to remember something, or you're more likely to encode a memory if it relates to your survival in some way. And I can imagine that for all of us on our wounded healer's journey, that or journeys, that, you know, this is about survival in a lot of ways. You know, especially when it comes to our physical wellness. Another thing is this idea of spaced practice. So, you know, this is something that you have to do multiple times over and over again. But, you know, you need to space it out over time and revisit it now and again. And that this process of kind of spacing things out over multiple sessions of ritual, if you will, is actually thought to be more effective than just sitting there doing it once for a very long period of time. And so these priming and encoding exercises, or aromatic rituals, as we're going to call them, don't have to take a lot of time. They can be short and quick and to the point, and the point being that you continue to repeat them over and over again. Bringing it all together to create new narratives. So really, this is all to me about how we can engage with aroma from plants to create new narratives as kind of priming, encoding, and encoding exercises. And so these aromatic rituals, and I'm going to give you an example of one, need to be thematic and purposeful, and they should be, like I said, repeated, you know, short increments repeated over and over and over again over long periods of time, rather than just doing it once for, you know, a really long time and thinking that's gonna do it for you. So short, repeated over long periods of time. And so how do we do this? We can use aroma to imprint new emotions and new memories that hold significance for ourselves and for our clients. And we can invoke things like tea rituals. I'm gonna talk to you about a hydrosol-based breathing ritual in just a second. You know, again, we've got, you know, essential oils and meditation is an option. I love doing anointing oils and plant-based perfumes, where you're doing an anointing ritual, and maybe it involves something else like pulling of a tarot card. There's incense rituals, so the burning of aromatic plants that can be involved in this. Really, the world is your oyster when it comes to kind of creating your own aromatic ritual. But the point is really about priming and encoding new memories and new emotions. So we're going to kind of focus on that next. But I always suggest that people choose aromas from plants based on things like the folklore of that plant or the mythology surrounding that plant. And, also look at traditional and modern medicinal use, because this is all information from the collective, from humanity, that can help to provide meaning to that plant and to that aromatic ritual that you are creating surrounding that plant and that new emotion or that new narrative that you want to create in yourself. And so this is a really great example of a plant that has got an enormous amount of folklore surrounding it that is incredibly meaningful, including, the story of the daughter of the king of Sparta, and the god of the sun falling in love with her, and the king of Sparta just getting absolutely furious about this and then killing her and burying her in the ground. And when the god of the sun, Apollo, finds out that his love has been killed and buried, he finds her grave and weeps on her grave. And when his tears drop to the earth, up springs the rosemary. And it's, interesting because this is a plant that has a long history of use in the British Isles, especially surrounding grief and mourning, at funerals, and wearing rosemary on your lapel at a funeral. It becomes a symbol of remembrance, honoring the dead, and processing the loss. It's also considered, in the medical astrology tradition, an herb of the sun. And the flowers were used in conserves and cordials to comfort the sad and melancholic heart. We think of solar herbs are herbs that support the vital spirit. They're often associated with both the physical and emotional heart. And rosemary in particular is an herb that's known to really let love and joy into the heart. So we could turn to rosemary, for example, throughout a grieving process or throughout integrating a loss, that can bring in this energy of the sun and this permission to be sad, this permission to grieve. And it can be quite a powerful guide to the psyche in navigating that loss and integrating that loss. So just an example of kind of going to the folklore of a plant to inspire you and the narratives that you are needing. And then, of course, there's a very easy ritual that you can do. I love using hydrosols for these breathing rituals, is what I call them, aromatic breathing rituals. And Mountain Rose Herbs has a wonderful line of hydrosols. This is one here that we distill here at Sovereignty Herbs, the Wormwood Mugwort hydrosol, which is all about strength and boundaries. And so, all you have to do is, with the hydrosol, this is a perfect example of something that can take just a few seconds. You find a quiet place where you can sit comfortably and won't be interrupted. And you focus on a keyword or a phrase that provides you with comfort, with motivation, feelings of self-worth, acceptance, whatever narrative you need, you can then start to associate with that aroma. So I suggest that people sit and they speak this word or phrase out loud or to themselves while spritzing the hydrosol within what I call their olfactory distance. So not straight in your eye, not right up your nose, not straight into your mouth, but close enough to you that you can actually breathe in that water, that beautiful aromatic water, and you can really bring in that smell. So you're speaking this phrase or this word or this narrative out loud. You're inhaling through your mouth that wonderful aroma for 5 seconds, holding your breath for 5 seconds, and then breathing out again for 5 seconds. And then you repeat by saying your word or phrase, breathing in the aroma, holding your breath, and then slowly exhaling. And you can just do this really quickly anytime during the day. And it's a really wonderful, accessible way, to work with aromatics. We don't, as I mentioned before, we have this really amazing opportunity to work with teas. I love aromatic teas for this. You can do wonderful tea rituals and breathing rituals with aromatics from teas. Hydrosols are lovely. Burning the plant material as an incense is lovely. It doesn't have to be an essential oil, and it certainly doesn't have to be going on all day long for you to have an impact. Remember, all we need is just a few seconds of an aroma to make that connection, to drive straight into those areas of the brain that are responsible for memory and emotion. We just need a few seconds of an aroma to access the psyche.
Thank you all for joining me on this journey through our sense of smell, our psyche, and the amazing aromatic gifts of the plant kingdom that can be used for emotional healing and therefore physical healing. I hope you've enjoyed it, and I'm wishing you all the best for the remainder of 2021 and beyond.
Hello, everyone. I don't know about you, but I found Erica's voice so soothing. I was like leaning back in my chair, soaking in all of the herb knowledge, and it was really wonderful. So a huge thanks to Erica. I mean, what a detailed, involved presentation. It was really great. And we're going to send all those questions on to Erica, and she might have some time to answer them. So we have come to the end of our program. You can see some information here that if you are registered and logged in via Zoom, you'll get a recording of the event and some exclusive offers. So give us some time to do that. But I wanted to thank Mountain Rose Herbs for hosting this today and making this possible and finding these fantastic herbalists to bring in. It's really wonderful. If you are looking to find people that you saw today, here is the information you have been waiting for. You might want to grab your phone and take a quick picture of what you see here right now, because I'll leave it up for a little bit. But this is all of the information that if you're looking for people's websites and what's going on. And you also notice down the bottom right that there is save the date for the Free Herbalism Project in May 2022. That is intended to be a face-to-face, potentially May Day celebration, but that doesn't mean that there won't be more online free herbalism gatherings. So if you've enjoyed these, the intention is to continue with a little bit of both, so we can make sure that you can access these in the comfort of your home or garden or forest or hollowed out tree trunk, wherever you are. And then you can also potentially come and join us in person in Oregon. So we're so grateful for all of your time, for everyone being here. You know, there's a whole bunch of people like Elisa and Maya on the back end that have been part of this and working really hard to make sure all the tech goes smoothly. And we love our herb people and our herbalists, and we're so grateful that you're here. So I'll leave this slide up for a few more minutes if you're frantically trying to write everything down with pen and paper. And just peace to everyone. I hope that if you're in the Northern Hemisphere, your winter is glorious, and we can't wait to get together with all of you again soon. So thanks for being here. It's been fantastic, and have a great weekend.